and I knew that I only went into it because all my like counselors had told me to like have a real job, like just wanting to be a writer wasn't a real career path. And I'm like, what? You mean like wanting to be like a Hunter S. Thompson, Noam Chomsky, except in a Scooby Doo van, driving around writing freelance like journalist articles isn't a real career? Come on, like my dream
And
wasn't good enough, but
I was gonna say that's what guidance counselors are for, crushing your dreams.
well,
Um,
I've heard so many stories lately. So I had a decent relationship with one of my guidance counselors. He helped me get a bunch of scholarships and so on. But like, really, they're just there to get you into a career field, which is get you to
yeah.
college and get you. And it like it as I'm older now and on the outside, like I didn't really have parents, so I relied on guidance counselors for that advice. And
Mhm.
as I'm older and jaded, I'm looking back on it and I'm like, oh, like they really were just like grinding me up into like a cog in the system like the whole time. I thought they really were about like higher learning and education and like chasing your dreams and having goals. No, it really was just like go become a productive like member of society. And I was like, I had so many problems my first semester at college because it wasn't aligned with what I wanted to do. Now later on, like all my friends I made there were uh like comp sci majors, or there's another one which is basically business computer science majors. All of them have great careers. Like all of them, all of them were big nerds and dirty creatives in various different ways. But like the one who majored in being a dirty creative just ended up unemployed. And
Um, yeah. Thankfully, I haven't wrestled much with unemployment. That's not been it, but it's a lot of jumping from career to career. But now yeah, my job is as a social worker, and it's been rewarding. So at least there's that. And I've kind of accepted that my creative endeavors didn't necessarily have to be my career to begin with. It certainly would have made things easier, but sometimes things just don't work out that way.
right, and I mean
Um,
you've really been crushing it just from going through Goonhammer. Like you've clearly got the spark and the thing for writing. I see chat gangs here. Let me do the intro real quick, and we'll pick this back up. I
okay.
see Hades, Death God, Snitbag showing up, like Tomb King Tristan. How's it going? What's up, chat gang? I'm of course the magical Mr. Mephisto, the most dangerous man in Age of Sigmar. Uh, Tonight we're going to be joined by Alice from Goonhammer, also known as RagnarokAngel. We're going to be talking about Ossiarch Bonereapers, kind of the state of the game, and apparently tons of writing. So how's it going? How's it going, Alice?
It's going pretty good. It's really an honor to be on the show. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. We both you sort of joined the AOS Illuminati, and we were just hitting it off. I'm like, I got to have her on the show. I got to talk to her. This is it's really I've been excited about this kind of all day. I just realized that I have my email open up like a professional. There we go.
Mm,
Goonhammer page up instead.
okay.
Doom King Tristan. Oh, I like this person. All right.
Don't worry, we have time.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, no, so one thing I learned all too late was that writing's my passion. It didn't need to be my career. Of course, I went and made a mistake with Age of Sigmar being my passion and starting a fucking podcast about it. And like, I don't. What is with this drive for millennials to like monetize or commoditize all their pastimes? I don't. What's up with that?
I, I,
Go ahead.
I think from my perspective, it's trying to find a compromise between the fact that we do live in a capitalist society where we have to make money to live, but also wanting to be able to carve out our own sort of thing that's ours. Like the at this point, the way that jobs are done, um, it's not necessarily a statement of the fact that things used to be better or anything like that.
Right,
But
right. Yeah.
when it comes to professions and things like that, people are so atomatized and depersonalized from the work that they do right now. As a social
You might
worker,
say they're alienated from the means in some way.
yeah, some sort of means of making things
Yeah,
or some
there might be some
product.
sort of like alienation from the means of something. Yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna write about that someday. I'll get
Yeah,
back to that.
yeah, yeah. I bet
But
someone needs to write a really prescriptive, like in-depth text about this somewhere. Uh, no, I knew we were gonna hit it off. Go on. Yeah. Um,
but no, I think ultimately it's, the only thing we have left in this type of society we live in is, oh, I'm able to profit off of the thing I'm doing.
mhm,
um and that is how I have been taught that satisfaction is earned. So the way to prove that my pursuit is valid is to make money off of it.
right.
And whether or not, necessarily we'd feel that way if the circumstances are different, I can't say for sure, but I think that has a lot to do with how things work now.
Right. Right. Well, for me, the pressure has often been on my time. This need to be productive, and this internalized, if I'm using my time on something, it must be productive. I've got to be able to measure it as productive. Like if it means I get the X hits on this video, or back when I still wrote for Kotaku, or when I did some of my own freelance stuff, like how many hits did it get? How many retweets did it get? Or like I wasn't as productive with that article as I was a previous article. And this real like sort of Damocles of the almighty algorithm of validation hanging above my head. And so I'm trying to deprogram from that currently. Like this last year has been me like trying to write for myself again and trying to like do these shows without caring if I get another like subscriber on my YouTube later on. Like where I can just do the stuff I love without that. And if the cool thing happens down the line, awesome. I think hard work and passion and purpose, those are all prerequisites to succeed in what you want. It's kind of just luck and timing on the rest. And the best you can do is just like do what makes you happy. I'm postulating here though. I'm sorry.
No, by all means, I
um,
understand it. Actually, I kind of had a two-parter question that was related to this. If I'd be
Go
so
ahead.
bold.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Uh, my first question was, how and why did you get into Age of Sigmar? I'm sure you've explained it many a times here, but I'd love to hear it from people. Especially because for this particular game, it's had such a tumultuous history. It's fascinating to see what was the switch that made people to come to it.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love when people ask me questions on my own show. And for the record, I treat every show like it's someone's first episode. Somebody out there hasn't seen my show before, and this is going to be the first episode they ever watch. So, if it means rehashing inside jokes or narratives, that's totally cool. I think that's actually the way to approach podcasting. How did I get into AOS and why? So I played, like many people, I played Warhammer Fantasy Battle in like middle school. Would have been circa like 1998, fourth edition Warhammer Fantasy Battle was the game around that time. Jumped in on Undead because I was an angsty little goth punk kid, and played into high school all the way up until I went off to college. Right. Um, when I went to college, the game of the land was 40K. Now I had a cursory interest in 40K because if you're playing Warhammer Fantasy Battle in the 90s, you can't not know what 40K is. I try to think of a time from my fixed perspective. Warhammer Fantasy Battle was the flagship back then, and 40K was like the upstart. But
Hmm.
that's a very localized opinion. I haven't gone back in time to like check. I know in terms of the sort of license, it kind of started with Chaos Warriors and Warhammer Fantasy Battle, and with Citadel kind of making products for Dungeons and Dragons, then branching off trying to do their own thing and develop their own IP. Like I understand that from a very technical standpoint. Yeah, we can look at the history of it, but I don't remember the popularity. That feels harder to measure, you know. But from my fixed perspective in Winona, Minnesota, in the late '90s, Warhammer Fantasy Battle was the game of the land, but 40K was like kind of coming along, and a lot of people at my local game shop. Shoutouts to Jimmy Jams, uh, comic book, video game. If you trace my interests, they all go back to that one store. Vampire the Masquerade. The 40K was coming into it. Necrons had just come out, but they were just a White Dwarf book, and they had 2 units. what was it? Immortals and what were the other ones? Like warriors, right? Like immortals and warriors. The little dudes with the weird butts that flew around, and then the actual like Necron warriors. Um, that was it. Didn't get into them, even though they would have been space skeletons. Space vampires were the next best thing. Played Blood Angels in college. Um, Never loved 40k. It's really weird because if you ask me my favorite writers, Philip K. Dick is up there, Cormac McCarthy. Like, I tend as an individual, it has always been fascinated towards me, or for me, towards modern and sci-fi or speculative fiction. I really like fantastical modern, where you take modern and you just mess with the dials on reality. That's like my favorite genre to write. Tends to be what I read mostly when I'm not reading like boring white guy shit like history and philosophy, right? Um, like it so 40 game just never resonated with me, but I did like the skirmish vibe of it. Okay, so then I did what many people did. I got out of college. I partied a little bit. I bounced around, on couches for a while. Really, like, kind of lost track of Warhammer entirely. Uh, so my friend Haywo is getting into Age of Sigmar.
Big fan.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We used to be Magic the Gathering grinders together. Um,
Oh, okay.
So I actually taught him to play Magic the Gathering back in college. Me and my friend Alex, or our mutual friend Alex, also known as Japanese Peso, taught him. A long story on the nicknames. My nickname actually comes from my college days. My full nickname,
Oh,
for
okay.
people who don't know the story, is the Magical Mr. Mephisto because it sounds like a magical bunny rabbit. That's my full actual nickname. It's like a Tribe Called Quest or a pimp named Slickback. You have to say the whole thing. Yeah. Uh, maybe we'll make a donation incentive the next rantathon for like to reveal what Haywo's nickname was back in college. Um, but no. So anyway, like we were the Gathering grinders. Have been friends since college. He's actually the person who moved me to Milwaukee when I was like a lost soul out of college, not knowing what to do with like, sort of shattered dreams and no career path, right? He's like, hey, my grandpa's got a business. Come do IT stuff for him. Like the rest is basically history. So anyway, he says, hey, come play Age of Sigmar. This is about 2017. Um, it's good. It's good now. Like his exact pitch to me was, it's come play Warhammer. It's good now. And so like that was just before the Legions of Nagash battle tome was about to drop in like what, the January February of 2018. Like, so I'm looking into getting into armies. I pick up right where I left off in college with Undead or GA Death, and pretty much haven't looked back since. So I guess that's the how, right? That's the how,
Right.
the how of how I got into Age of Sigmar. The why, for me, Age of Sigmar is a game where all the voices in my head come to play together. If many folks in chat gang know that like my sort of like I've got like this sort of like I'm an omni nerd. Like I've got comic books and tabletop RPGs. I played Magic the Gathering. Love video games. I worked in games journalism for a while, all the way up until GamerGate, and then like it got so toxic, for women and allies, and I just couldn't do it anymore. I wrote one article called Coming Out, and it was like K spelled with a K about like Mortal Kombat and the one gay character and how they made it subtextual, and like and I got flamed, and it was like just for one article. I'm like, really, guy? Like, okay. And I just,
Really?
what was that?
I said, really? That just sounds like an unrealistic scenario
Yeah,
to me.
that would never happen to somebody, right? Yeah. So I lost my taste for games journalism. I was just kind of like, like I said, I always have all these interests. We've established, we're both writers with that passion. Um, but if you ask me, like the sort of omni nerd ladder, right? Like where the rungs are, I mean, it's a linear scale, and I don't believe in like linear scales per se. But for metaphor, the top rung is usually RPGs, tabletop RPGs for me. It's like I love it's how I got into gaming to begin with was in about the fourth grade. I went over to my friend's house in North Carolina. His older brother ran us in like must have been the 2.0 AD&D starter set with the paper map and minis and some dice and shit. And I was like, what is this? I'm playing with my Ninja Turtles at this point, and I'm like, what is this game? And I was like, that was like my one hit of like a tabletop RPG. I played video games. I played with action figures, and then it was like I had to seek out RPGs for like the next few years. Sixth grade, I meet my friend Sam. He's talking about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles RPG, and I'm just like, tell me more. And fell into RPGs. It's been my favorite thing ever
Two
since.
tastes that go great together.
Oh yeah, oh, like it's like chocolate and peanut butter, like when the cars
Yeah.
smash, and that's how they get Reese's peanut butter cups. Like I'm like, but I've always wanted to be a writer. The first thing I ever wanted to be in the second grade, when people are like, I want to be a dinosaur, I want to be an astronaut. I'm like, I want to be a writer. I loved Roald Dahl at the time and The Hobbit. I'm like,
Did
I want
anybody tell you which was the most unrealistic of those three?
to actually being a writer, because there's surgery to be a dinosaur now. I've seen it, like where people are like getting like reconstructive surgery to be a dinosaur. I'm like, live your fucking truth if you're a dinosaur, dude. And astronaut is just like there's an actual career path to it. Like you go into the Air Force, maintain like some test scores, like be decently applied, go into the Air Force. Like there's an actual career path if you want to be an astronaut. Like you got to have some breaks your way, but you do in every career field, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like what's the career path for writer? Like becoming a middling drunkard for like a while, like fight inner demons like on like some mountaintop, like
Certainly helps.
yeah, so tabletop RPGs, like love the telling stories that people get to interact with, sort of thing. Even when I played Warhammer Fantasy Battle, my friend Sam's a through line through this whole thing, because Sam is who got me into Warhammer as well. Like we didn't have, we're in the sixth grade. I've got like a blister pack of skeleton archers, a skeleton chariot he got me for my birthday, and like a Vlad von Karstein or something, right? Like we can't play real games, so we'd set up little scenarios. Like I remember there was like a Skaven heist, basically, where like the Skaven are assaulting this carriage, and the carriage has to get from one side of the table to the other, and we did that with skeletons. And you could, the whole thing is like you have infinite Skaven, but you can only bring on like, I don't know, 500 points at a time, every turn or something like that. So like he'd kill them, and then I'd bring on the skeletons and put them a little further down, and he'd like have his little like lion chariot or whatever it was, trying to like get to the other end of the table, and we just make up these little scenarios. So I tell that story to tell this story. When I'm playing Age of Sigmar, hey, it's good now, says Haywo. It's got the skirmish thing that I always liked a lot better from 40k. I'm garbage at guessing directions. I don't know if it's a left brain, right brain thing. I just don't care to apply to it. Like I can't guess. I don't fucking care if that's 6 inches or 12. I understand, like, if I pre-measure, I go, okay, I need to make a 7-inch charge. I know roughly the table size, but literally guessing, like, your charges, being wrong, and 1 inch meaning you just fucking lose the game. Like, fuck that, So I liked 40k how it had the skirmish vibe. It didn't have as much micro managing, the stuff that a video game RTS just does better than a tabletop, right? Like so it had the elements I liked from 40k, but then it also had this like the narrative thing that I cared about. Not that I'm a narrative gamer. I'm more of a competitive player. But like it's just enough of a like I am Nagash on the table now, like fear me. Just enough of that role play, just enough of that like like I'm losing a game and I decide to tell my own story where like, okay, I'm going to lose this game, but this is like Bone Stevens. Bone Stevens kills generals, and like now Bone Stevens needs to kill the general, and that's the whole narrative I make up in that moment. Like little things like that. It was all the stuff came together to to where like all the voices in my head, all these things that were pulling me in a bunch of different directions, from the RPGs to the video games, like everything, all came together in this one kind of beautifully flawed game. Like flawed but functional game, and it's been getting better kind of every year since I started in a noticeable, meaningful trend. So I don't know. It's just, I mean, did that answer it all? Did I leave any?
No, yeah, it was a very informative answer. Thank you.
Yeah. Skaven and Undud, A Tale as Old as Time. Yeah, I mean, there is an alternate reality where Mephisto is actually a Skaven player instead. Like there is an alternate reality like parallel to this universe right now, where the Mephisto who's the Skaven player is wearing like a Skaven shirt right now instead of a Bonereapers shirt, and hosting this exact podcast, but from a Skaven perspective. Like, when I was getting in with my friend Sam, it was like I was either going to play Skaven or Undead, which is interesting because when I got back into the game, Scryer was pretty decent back in 2017. I'm like, is this my opportunity to go back and fix a missed opportunity from my youth and play Skaven finally? And I'm like, nah, they've got zombie dragons and Nagash. Like for 1 minute though, I almost started with Skaven and Clan Scryer, getting into AOS back in 2017. Like so it's like in all the cartoons and stuff. If you think about it, that's when you make the alternate reality.
I was about to say, everybody in the chat, do your what if Mr. Mephisto?
Yeah, roll the dice like in Community, like, like what if yeah. See, I don't think I have a podcast now if I'm a Skaven player, because my podcast started on the weekend coming back from NashCon. I think it was Nova did their teasers, and I saw the OBR trailers. I was just like, I need to talk about this loudly with Haywo on the internet. And so I've just like called him up. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go live on. I was already streaming, like I was already a Twitch streamer. I'm like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm gonna do an AOS show. Come on and talk to me about Ossiarch Bonereapers. And this now your episode. This is episode 104.
Yeah, I took a look at your catalog before. I was very impressed.
This
It's
is
a big monument.
this is technically the finale for season 2 of RantCast. I do a 52 episode quote unquote, which is about a year.
Yeah.
So you could do 26. I could do what our friends over at Age of Sigmar do, which is just arbitrarily say it's a new season. But so yeah, so this is you're the finale for season 2, by the way, Al. So
Damn, putting pressure on
yeah,
me now, aren't
pressure.
you?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean that's how it started, and 104 episodes going strong, and here I am. So
Yeah, the
now
other half of the question was going to be how'd you end up doing this, but you also answered that, so
ranting has its advantages.
it
You
does. Eventually, you more or less get to the point.
Yeah, you just meander through it and take all the like all the sideways. So I gotta ask you the same question now. How did you end up in AOS and stuff?
Certainly, there's a lot of interesting parallels there that you're telling me that link up with my own history. So I didn't do wargaming as a kid. I was a poor kid in Boston. I didn't have the money for that. I took one look at the just the price to buy one box of um, whatever, and was just like, no, I can't afford that. Um, and so that all kind of skipped me by until uh, I finished college, went to the Peace Corps and came back, and that was when I had my first like real jobs.
Holy shit! You
Uh,
did you were in the Peace Corps? I'm sorry, not to cut you off. That's like
yeah,
actually pretty hardcore. Like that's I mean that's like a whole podcast in itself, just asking you about like doing Peace Corps stuff.
yeah, maybe I'll talk about it sometime.
Yeah.
But I distinctly remember because a lot of my friends did play, because they could do that, and it seemed interesting. But I also kind of wrote it off as like not my thing because just like you, I was big into RPGs as a kid. My first experience, I think, I was 6 years old, and some of my dad's friends, like had me join in on them and let me, they kind of told me what to do for the most part. It would have been second edition D&D, but they told me what to do for the most part, and that was really fun. I was I liked the early Final Fantasies. I think at that point there probably would have been like one and what would have been two, would have been out by that point. So I liked those, and I remember distinctly thinking, "Wow, this is like that, but you can actually like do what you want. You don't have to follow the story."
Yes.
Um, uh, and so like that really brought like a long time love of RPGs. And I'm when it comes down to it, I enjoy co-op experiences. I like working with people to solve a problem, things like that. And I wasn't much of a competitive person, so I took one look at like war games. Like, I don't know if that's for me. You're going head to
Right.
head like that. It seems pretty intense. Um, but when I came back from the Peace Corps and I got my first real job, like I suddenly had money throw around on things like that. And my friends were into it. At the time, they were playing War Machine and Hordes because that was that era where 40K was really struggling, and War Machine and Hordes was filling the gap. But
I
it's
remember
funny how
that
those.
Gen Con fondly because War Machine was everywhere, and I of course wasn't playing 40. I was there for for like the Magic Legacy like side event and stuff. So I remember this time period, but I wasn't in wargaming. So continue. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. And I remember I got into Menoth because you know that sort of Christian theology type aesthetic is like a great way to grab me. So I did
Angels
that,
and
and
demons are sweet. Like there's a
it is.
reason John Constantine's like my.
I said
Oh, so gone. Yeah.
I've said in the past, say what you will about the Catholic Church, but they managed to land an aesthetic that works.
Well, if
Um,
you turn it like voodoo Catholicism is one of the like I don't believe what you want to believe and stuff like that, but like just from like a mythos sort of stance, like if you take like you write a story and like you're like okay Catholicism except it's all literal,
mhm.
like what like it's pretty dope. Go on. Sorry, go on.
No, it's fine. And so yeah, I was in War Machine and Hordes, and then but like I came in at the worst possible time. I came in when third edition just launched, and I distinctly remember that because a friend of mine was like, at the time there was optimism. He was like, "Oh, you're coming in at a good time. It's a new edition, so you won't have to, relearn rules or anything like that." And I said, "Great." Played it for a while, enjoyed it, but like the cracks were forming, and I saw a Eldar start collecting set. I didn't call them start collecting; it was Battle Force, something like that. On discount on the shelf. They were trying to get rid of it, so I picked that up. Getting into 40K, I was like, okay, I actually like this a whole lot more. This is good. And as we went into eighth, um, eighth, I remember, and this is where Age of Sigmar starts to come in. I've always remembered Age of Sigmar being on the periphery of my mind because for so long it was that game everybody joked about that nobody played,
Mm-hmm.
everybody hated it, and only thing people had to say about it was like that you had to pretend to ride a horse type stuff. Um, and so it was always in my periphery, but I hadn't paid attention to it. But in 40K, I eventually ended up like settling. Like the faction I ended up liking the most was Thousands. So I had Zinch Demons, and I saw a Facebook post for an FLGS saying, "Who wants to learn Age of Sigmar?" This would have been mid 2017.
About the
Who
same
wants to
time
learn?
about the same
Yeah,
time I'm picking up. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's funny how that lined up.
yeah.
Um, uh, the guy at the FLGS was like, "Who wants me to teach Age of Sigmar?" And I had 1,000 points of demons, so I just kind of gathered a whole gaggle of demons and said, "Sure, teach me." The Zinch book had just come out,
That's right
and a
around the time
yeah,
like Zinch is about to become like kind of our first proper boogeyman army, right?
yes, because I remember I looked at the book and I was like, "This is great," because there was so much about 40K because eighth edition 40K is basically it was a refinement of Age of Sigmar rules, and then they've sort of kind of gone back and forth, stealing each other's homework. Um, and but I was like, the Zinch book was like, it was one of the really first what we would consider, what we would consider tomes because it had everything in it, sub factions, artifacts, all that stuff. And like I remember the paradoxical cloak was what stuck out to me. It was you got +2 to your save, but you had to reroll successes, and I was like, "Ooh, this kind of goofy shit. This is what I like. I like this."
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Those great like this is maybe a tangent. Put a pin in it for later about the state of artifacts right now versus that sort of paradoxical cloak.
I think you know where we're going with that, and I can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah, yeah. All right.
Um, but yeah, ultimately, I ended up like my first real army that I committed to was Nagash, Legions of Nagash, because the book came out, um, and Nagash's War Scroll is what sold me.
Really?
I took a look at it and saw, so going back to RPGs for a second, I've always been a magic user, fundamentally. Clerics usually, mages secondary. And then I saw how many spells he cast. I was like, "Excuse me, how many spells?" Like it was 8.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Okay, so this is clearly like if you want the Sorcerer Supreme, this is the guy you take." I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna take Nagash, and everything else is just gonna go around that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then from then on, like my first major event was the um was at Adepticon, um where I did I think it would have been the first tournament of second, because I distinctly remember I had a Nagash list, and I actually did quite well despite the fact that I really was not very good at the game yet, because um it was also a lot of new people as well. A lot of people were jumping on at that point too, so a lot of people did not know how to counter Nagash that well.
Right.
Um,
Well, the
I just think
concept of beating a single model was something that we raised in the water level a little bit later on. Early on is that meet me in the middle and fight type
yeah,
mentality, and
yeah,
fine, meet Nagash in the middle and fight with.
yeah.
Yeah.
You better bring something heavy, because
Right.
he's gonna.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it went from there. Like I had so much fun um at the event. Even for a GT, the mood feels so much more relaxed than it does in many other war games. People just really more feel like they're there to have a good time. You're gonna find bad eggs anywhere. It doesn't. That's
Yeah. Yeah.
that's not a statement about the sanctity of the Age of Sigmar community or anything like that. But in general, it's a lot more relaxed and chill, and it's become one of my favorite parts about it.
I mean, I feel like you asked like the how and the why, but like there's
Mhm.
a third unasked question is like why still, and for me that's the community, and I think you'd agree with that. Like why, I stay in AOS even though I didn't play games for a year, right? Like
Yeah.
why? Because the community, like the camaraderie in the AOS thing. Like you said, it's in the atmosphere. The first minute you step into like a room, heck, you can be in the like Gen Call has like a big hall. You'll be in the AOS little corner where it's like a fucking 12-person tournament, and like you could feel the vibe shift versus like just right across the divider with all the other war games. The Star Wars Legion folk looked like they were having fun too, but like I don't care about Star Wars.
Yeah.
We'll circle back to that one
To
in a
each
second.
their own.
Yeah, no, that's a joke. That's a joke.
No, 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 no. I get it.
Real quick, Arctic Circle dropping 1,000 RDP. People 3004 dropping 1,000 RDP. Each to remind you that Chat Gang ain't nothing to mess with. Thank you so much. Um,
Good.
and yeah. Um, so where does writing for Goonhammer come into this narrative?
Yeah. You probably saw me go into my web browser a minute ago, just because I wanted to find the piece. If it would be okay, I want to read a little bit,
No,
because
go ahead. 100%.
I found Goonhammer. It came up because we're all sort of the majority of us, at least at the steering committee, are refugees from something awful. It was the
Interesting.
community, the something the that's actually where Goonhammer comes from.
See,
Something awful goons. We had a vote to change it at one point, because we were like, do we want to continue to have that association? And the argument essentially became, well, we're getting recognized by name, so it's probably too late.
too
But
late.
that's
Yeah.
actually where Goon came from.
Yeah, like if I didn't want to, so I with Mephisto there is a tie to Diablo, and
Okay.
I had to be like, well, do I rebrand now or something? Like it's a college nickname, really. Like, can I
Yeah.
really not be Mephisto anymore? No,
Yeah.
not the
And
same.
and RagnarokAngel comes from me when I was 13, and I put two things together that sounded cool, and now it's kind of stuck with me at 33 years old.
I mean, it's
Sometimes you just get
pretty
stuck with
metal.
it.
Yeah, you get stuck with things. Real quick though, so something awful. I stopped. I didn't really get deep in something awful. Everyone had their like favorite forum or thread.
Yeah.
My favorite was like your band sucks. I don't even know if
Hmm.
you remember this. Like, so every
Yeah.
week, there's like Catterday. There's a bunch of random shit on something awful. But your band sucks, and the whole thing was just this one person would just like every week roast a different band, and I
Yeah.
will always remember. So like you'd suggest and like what band should get roasted. And I remember Tool, and the roast was your songs are too long. But would go on these huge long form rants. That right there. So this is another one of those like those idiosyncrasies, those parallels we have. That informed that your band sucks on something awful is what informed how I went on to approach my games journalism and the stuff I got to, and the rantcast format is heavily influenced by those articles back then, because these big, long-winded, performatively angry, finding stuff to nitpick and like just destroy.
It's genuinely incredible how much of an influence something awful had on internet comedy, even 20 years later. It's certainly fallen far from graces, but you can still see its DNA in a lot of
Oh
how
yeah.
internet humor works.
Oh yeah, like the sort of like wry, sometimes anti-humor, sometimes like you've gone too deep into satire territory, like like that whole yeah, no, it's 1,000%. It's like I'm just like looking back on it, because for me something awful just kind of like was a thing I went to as a kid, and then I kind of like I got into 4chan for a while on BV Co and TG, before they all got split up into all their various subsections. Like Pokemon got it, like before Poll existed. Like I was already getting off of 4chan before then, and it just like it's interesting how the internet has just like I've been wrong about the internet the whole time. By the way, I've always been on the wrong side of like the sort of like transitioning, the shift, like wherever it is, like late to come to video or YouTube specifically. I did streaming early. That's like the one thing I did do early, but under a different handle. And all the progress I had from my when Justin TV became Twitch, I switched to Mephisto, and like the Leetgeist was my handle back then on Justin TV. Like all the like success I had as like as a random streamer, like gone. And the hardest thing to do is like establish yourself as a random streamer or a variety streamer. It's the hardest thing
Yeah.
to do. But yeah, no. Anyway, you're something awful. Just participating in like the sort of wargaming community, and then like part of Goonhammer. Yeah, how's that?
The 40K community Goonhammer started pretty much exclusively as a 40K site, but they had always like aspirations to branch out from there, which at this point we have, thankfully. But I wasn't even involved with them at the time. For my understanding, for a while it was just sort of a blog where they just kind of shit posted for a while. But then about a year before I came in, so it's COVID means COVID and lockdowns mean that time means nothing.
Well,
I think
time has
that
meant nothing forever. COVID just
yeah,
let us know time is meaningless.
I think 2019 is when I got involved, so it was like a good year, maybe more than that, before I was involved.
Okay.
But it started like that, and like one of my draws was that like they did start competing articles, and a lot of that was like, it was great to see something that was doing what 4chan's 1D 4chan's you know, um, competing guides, except without the rape jokes.
Yeah.
So it was good to see that.
The Mephiston like 1D 4chan write up is hilarious, except for the rape jokes. Like it like there that humor is that's the overt, the over the top, the turn to 11 sense of humor that I think makes like 40K kind of fun. The tongue in cheek. Have the tongue in cheek without the um without the vulgarity turned to 11. I don't mind like swearing and like ultra violence and
Yeah,
stuff like that, but
I
like
don't
yeah.
mind that, but
Yeah.
um, so there was that, and then there was an article that like I remember Rob Karujan, he's gonna kill me for not being able to pronounce it, but he knows nobody can do that. Jones did an article where he went to Nova 2019 and detailed his battle report, and I distinctly remember it because it made me laugh so hard that I messaged him. He was giving a recap of his games, and the very first game that he did, he brought a chitin with his corn army, the Forge World giant robot.
Yes.
Kytan. And he starts the game, and within the first turn, I'm gonna read an excerpt from it. 9:52 a.m. Rob starts shooting. He puts 6 damage on the Lord Discordant and 5. Rob, this isn't this Rob. It's actually his opponent was also named Rob. He puts 6 damage on the Lord Discordant and 5 on my Rhino with his Storm Fangs. Then uses the keen sense of stratagem on the Fire Raptor so it can ignore my Benediction of Darkness. Sure. Starts firing. It hits with everything and wounds with most things. The saves do not go well. I use my CP reroll to try and reroll a save against the one last cannon shot that wounded, hoping to keep it alive for just one turn. That was a mistake. The time I thought I could heal it back up by a bit if it survived. It's BS. Its ballistic skill never degrades, so that would be fine. Improbably, the heavy bolter scores 9 wounds and takes the chitin out. I roll to see if it explodes. It does. Here's where things get real bad. 9:54 a.m. This is bad, real bad. Most of my army is stacked around the chitin. I start rolling for damage. Warpsmith, 6 damage, dies. Jump Pack Sorcerer, 4 damage, dies. Huron Blackheart, 6 damage, dies. Red Corsairs Marine Squad, 5 damage, dies. Black Legion Sorcerer, 3 damage. Dark Apostle, 6 damage, dies. Dark Disciples, 2 damage, dies. The Lord Discordant, 6 damage, dies. The Rhino, 6 damage, dies. If you're keeping track at home, that's 42 mortal wounds dished out by my own exploding chitin. I rolled for the Rhino, which then also exploded, dealing 3 mortal wounds to the squad of Red Corsair Chaos Space Marines on the other side of it, and 3 of the Berserkers inside die. Rob used the last Stormfang to wipe them out. I tell Rob I'm sorry and I need a minute. I walk away from the table.
So
and then and then 10:04 a.m. Okay, I'm back. I'm fine. This is fine. I'm laughing actually. My first turn starts. I have 5 Chaos Space Marines and a Sorcerer left on the table. None of them are at full health. I move them to cover. I try and smite a Stormfang the Sorcerer. Rob denies it with his Rune Priest. I go to Deep Strike Abaddon and the Bloodletters. Rob reminds me that I can't do that because I've forgotten that it's only the first turn of the game. Right. I am wasting time here. I contemplate conceding, but I don't want to mess up scoring for Rob if it means he can't score all of his points. We move on to turn 2. All right, I'm good.
No. I like the matter of fact, like narrative approach to writing. Like, and that so Goonhammer, from my perspective, because I'm not a 40k person. The way anyone, the one I mentioned sort of when we were off air, there's like various rolling gags. One of them being I don't like Star Wars. Like I love Animorphs apparently. Like there's all these like random like gags. The big one is like I'm like 40k. Like what's that is usually like the joke. Whenever people try to bring up 40k like in chat or something like that. If I engage with a topic of 40k, then I have to talk about 40k, and I'm like I just don't have enough of a field of reference. So like Goonhammer, I didn't really like notice initially, and then just it feels like suddenly about last year it was just Goonhammer this, Goonhammer that, and like lo and behold, like essentially most of my perception of early Goonhammer, because when I started noticing AOS content, meta analysis and faction focuses and stuff like that, it turned out to be you, like just by happenstance, like.
Yeah. So after I read that article, my particularly dry reading may not have gotten that across.
Well, Tomb King Tristan is right. The joke isn't that; it's that I explained the joke. See, Norm Macdonald knew that explaining the joke was the best part of the bit. Go on.
So I messaged Rob and said, I love you guys' stuff. Are you guys looking for? Do you guys have anyone who does Age of Sigmar content? And Rob tells me no, but they would love that. And so I I just kind of slid in at just the right time. And for a very long time, I was pretty much the only Age of Sigmar person. We had other people coming in, and I want to give them credit. We have LR who does some stuff. We had Silks who did a lot of stuff for us. So we had other people, but it was much smaller team. And then over time we just kind of kept going through it, and especially with the launch of 3rd edition, we've had a lot of people involved now who I have a great group of people that I'm glad to have around. Mago Sockbert, LR is still around with us.
Magos hanging out in chat gang right now. I saw earlier. Magos had an excellent.
I feel like.
Go ahead.
I feel like they would kill me if I didn't mention their names, so I'm making sure to do that now. And Forge Father Bear have all been wonderful people to have around, right, and Joe Cryer as well.
Right on. Magos actually basically like entering chat gang, basically kicked in the door and was like, "What's up, OBR people?" Oh, and I guess other people too. And I was just like, "I already like you."
We also commiserate with each other on the current state of OBR.
I don't. Yeah, there's some commisery there, but like I'm like huffing hopium too while I'm like commiserating. Like I've got my little like oxygen tank of hopium next to me, and I like turn it up and take like huffs as I talk about the state of Ossiarch Bonereapers. If I were to go to, if someone asked me rather like bluntly, this I think past weekend, like if I went to a tournament right now, would I be bringing Soulblight Gravelords or Ossiarch Bonereapers? And I'm like, Soulblight Gravelords. Like with with Sons of Behemoth in the meta as they exist, OBR are like basically just walking into every tournament with at least one loss. Like just
Yeah.
there's just like SOB is holding an L for you, and as soon as they run into you, they're just gonna hand you that L, and you got to hold that now. Um, and that's before you even get into like the state of shooting, the table play. Command abilities got better with the September FAQ, but like, there's still a lot of problems. And we can go into Ossiarch Bonereapers a little bit more, but I'd like to talk a little bit more about Goonhammer right now specifically, because like you've got articles up for reviews for like the two battle tomes. I think the both recent battle tome reviews on sorry, I'm blanking on Orcs. It's been a week. Orcs and Stormcast, you've got those up. You've written your meta analysis. You've got like some stats analysis in there. Like you really like community spotlights on animosity. So I know Nunos and Alex are probably pretty stoked that you did that article. Like really just some range, and you've got this really sort of like conversational style of like how you write that I really respect and dig actually. So like kudos there. It's very very approachable, very very like insightful, very very thoughtful. Like you show a lot of thought going into it. Like I read the Ossiarch Bonereapers article is what I started with, and I just read that and I'm like, there's the one thing where like there's the FAQ, changed the context of what you said, but like beyond that, I'm like every one of these points is very well thought out and like correct. This is the this is the correct opinion, right? Like, um, most importantly, starting with the fact that you called Nagash the god of death, not the god of undeath. So, uh, um, sorry. So yeah, so you've branched out now. You've got a little bit bigger team working on Goonhammer. Obviously you weren't the only one before, like you mentioned. A lot of people helping Goonhammer. I mean, this is a great website. I've just been like poking around it because, like I said, like with 40K, like it's hard to get me to look at 40K stuff. But with the AOS angle kind of coming up, seeing it emerge, and all of us sitting around kind of in lockdown, having to like get more content. Um, I mean, the page layout here is like getting started. Boom, here's articles. Like this is almost more approachable than the Warcom website. Like to
Yeah.
act. I mean, almost it is. Like it is. Like
Well, your praise is appreciated.
yeah. Not if you bring Blendermen, but then you won't beat much else. Well, Blendermen, you're playing a different game. You're playing the will it blend game, and that's a fun game, but like it's not the same as winning. The answer is yes, it will blend.
Anything can blend if you try hard enough.
No, no. So specifically, Blendermen in chat gang refer to stalkers,
Okay.
uh,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
and the buffs that they can hold right now, the rend they're capable of generating in Petrifex Elite, uh, like they will blend what they get into. The challenge
Oh,
with
yeah.
Ossiarch Bonereaper will always be getting into what you want to with your priority, like what picking your priority targets, right? Um, the answer is always yes. By the way, they even blended Marathi, didn't they, Kyle? Sorry, we get. I don't. Do you have a? This is Twitch. Chat Gang is they're a part of the show. They're literally the show within the show. So every now and then I
Yeah.
glance over and I'm reading what they're. Okay, yeah,
No, sure, I get it.
yeah, right on. Just catching up on chat here. See if I missed anything. The AOS discords I've been in. Arctic Circle says the AOS discords I've been in are night versus day difference from the 40K ones. I've never met a more welcoming and friendly player base. Yeah, yeah. I've been around gaming my whole life. I've mentioned like RPGs, D&D, so on and so forth. The AOS community is something special, 100%.
Oh yeah, no, it's been one of the greatest things. It's coming back. The last couple of months have really when I've been able to get involved. It's been I think all of us have started to have to make, and we all did it at different times. We all had to make the decision about when did we feel comfortable doing live events again,
Right.
and being community involved again. And this has been a huge time for me in terms of getting out there and meeting more people, and been such a great community.
Right on. Right on. Yeah. So Magos mentioning hashtag read Goonhammer. Yeah, do that. Yeah, do that. Tomb King Tristan correcting me a little bit earlier on the 1d4. Horrific misogyny. Yes, a way better way of putting it. Yes.
That's a good way.
Yeah, that's a way better way of putting it. I try to avoid saying the R word personally. I don't. It's not a like a woke scold thing. I don't care if like other people use it. It's just like I don't know. Like I also try to avoid
It's
the word holler. I don't like that word either. Um,
no, it's an unpleasant word.
it's
I
an
don't blame
unpleasant
you.
word. Yeah, it's an unpleasant word, and for some people it can be triggering. So it's easier for me to just try to change my vernacular slightly. Um,
Sure, sure.
Hades being Hades. Hot sick Rob versus Rob action. Space Wolves Rob is best Rob? Question mark. Arctic Circle asks. Uh, it's 40k stuff. I have no idea.
Well, he's apparently smoked him, so
Uh,
uh,
article sounds like a Sherlock Holmes retelling. I mean, dope. And yeah, the joke is
I'll put the article in chat because it's worth a read. It's probably one of the funniest things that Rob ever did.
there you go. No, you're something special. Bang toasted. Yeah, minimum pants. Saying. By the way, Tomb King Tristan and wow, man, I'm getting like all the big guns out here. Going out into the season finale and then into the season open next week. We'll have a party at the All Points on next week in some capacity. No, Tristan will be there. Try to get a few other folks in on that. So wow. Thank you for hanging out and checking this week, Tristan. And then yeah, so the Blundermen, was this a unit of 6? I believe it was. They blended 27 Hagnar Witch Elves, 2 Baby Gargants, a Hagnar Queen on Cauldron General, 28 wounds on a Mega Gargant, and each of these was like 1 activation per attempt to what they blend. Unit of 3, Jesus Christ. So it was unit of 3.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
they can do the job for sure.
Yeah.
Put them in precision stance and point them at something. My challenge with them as of late is that and it is helped at least by their command ability, the one that lets them fly for purposes of crossing terrain.
Mm-hmm.
It's I've had challenges playing them. It's because they're so dangerous that people will zone in on them. And if you play against the wrong army, they will attempt to take them off the board as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And they occupy this really awful zone where at having 4 health, that's that procs a lot of abilities that do extra damage, and most painful of all,
Thralls, for instance, they get their extra buff against them, right?
yeah, a lot of that stuff. 4 points is the cutoff.
Yeah.
It's not good enough to count as double for capturing objective. And the one I find most painful is healing. You can't, if one model goes out, it's extremely difficult to bring one back, as opposed to other stuff, which is easier to heal or restore models in.
Right. It's almost like you want them to be 3 wounds, like with murder ponies, or just go all the way up to 5 wounds, right? Like, so.
Yeah, at 5 wounds, I think 4 wounds is, it's kind of like the 2 ugly zones are 4 wounds and 10 wounds.
Right.
4 wounds is, it doesn't qualify for double objectives, and the healing in the army, because like Nagash,
They just
Catacross, and Archons does 3. So if one of them dies, that's it. It's not coming back unless you like the stars align with the Harvester to get 4 wounds. But the odds of pulling that off are so unlikely. So I just find that tricky. They're very much glass cannon unit.
Yeah.
I don't doubt their utility, but the way that I tend to play, I kind of have sidelined them for a while until I can kind of get a better handle on them.
To be fair, I've never personally brought them off the bench. There's just a very devout core of Ossiarch Bonereapers players who swear by them. Go ahead.
I wish I could use them, but with my I've been running the same list constantly because I'm going to the New Orleans event, assuming that's still happening.
Hell yeah.
And so I've just been playing the same list for weeks now to try and like hone it to a razor thin edge, and it's just there wasn't room for the blender boys.
No, I respect the sort of practice and getting your reps in. The other thing I find, see there by the way, is that very thoughtful analysis I was talking about in your articles. Like it covered all the bases, perfectly eloquent. The other thing that I find kind of like to be a problem with them is not being battle line if there's no it's so difficult with the points of the way the army shakes out right now to like buy what I call like vanity picks. Like you kind of got to be all gas, you know, like it's you just don't have that wiggle room for, you know, you've got about 400 points of space in any given list to be cute, I guess, and that's usually
Yeah.
devoted to like getting the extra stuff you need to take an army that's kind of playing on the back foot this edition to actually put it
Mhm.
in the position to be able to dictate its own pace as opposed to always be reacting.
Yeah, for sure. The like sort of like I you can fit maybe one vanity pick in, and for me that's been the Harvester. I don't necessarily think that it's great. I don't think it's ideal, but I it does a lot of nice things that I like, and I find it's a very like a swingy model. It either gets shot off the board turn one because people see it and be like, oh, that's a monster, I'm gonna get an extra VP, um, or they don't, or they don't properly gauge it,
Yeah.
and it just slams to a horde of things and just rips them apart, and that is a satisfying thing when that happens. And also I think it's cute as hell. So
I I uh I agree with all of these. No, I see. I like the harvesters. It's also like Ossiarch Bonereapers right now. They feel like they're kind of denied playing a portion of 3.0, just kind of entirely left out in the wind. And even like the monster meta, they're kind of left out of that a little bit. Gothazar Harvester isn't quite a like full on buff wagon. It has its healing shtick, and it's not really like a combat monster per se. It's pretty aggressively costed in terms of like its combat profile, but it's a Stone Lord. It is, you know, a Stone Lord, a
yeah,
Frost Lord on Stonehorn, a zombie dragon, even it is not any of those things, you know.
absolutely. For a monster, it's very wimpy. I think what might have happened is during the writing, they kind of figured like 10 wounds was probably okay because it can heal itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably the thought that was going through their mind. But at 10 wounds and a 4-up save, it's a bit of a glass cannon.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, so I tend to mostly have it because monsters, because of the utility of monsters in terms of certain battle tactics and certain game modes.
Yeah,
It's good to bring at least one monster
yeah,
along if you can.
yeah, charging up
Um,
with it, and you basically guarantee your battle tactic turn one. Like it's pretty easy to
yeah,
get.
my opening play is I bring my list has um, Catacross, Archon, and Soul Mason for the for like my heroes,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of my opening play is to have Archon cast Metamorphosis on Catacross. So uh, those two, so now all three are monsters, and I
Good
just
tech.
kind of
Yeah.
run forward with them. It's like, oh, I got 3 VP, and they're like, how did you do that? And it's funny because I probably could lie about it because half the time everybody seems to just assume Catacross is a monster.
Yeah, yeah. No, I don't want to do that. Ossiarch Bonereapers caught so much heat early on that was like people playing their rules wrong. It's like I got like a chip on my shoulder against that crap. Playing Gothazar Harvesters wrong. What was the big one? When they activated certain abilities, like I'm just like, "Ugh, come on, guys, you're playing it wrong, and it's like you don't need to cheat to win with this quality army. So one of the things that I saw in your article, and is something I certainly agree on, is you said that like it really felt like with 3.0 they borrowed very heavily. They like kind of like looking over the shoulder of Ossiarch Bonereapers and like kind of copying their homework, right? Or
Frankly, absurd levels.
would you care to like elaborate? Or I don't want to paraphrase you. I want to your thoughts kind of direct from the source.
Yeah, certainly. So my point was that while there isn't as much CP to go around as Relentless Discipline, um, very much a similar concept was at play here. The idea that unit leaders could issue orders, that you were getting a regenerating pool of command points each turn that went away, um, and it really feels like they were using RDP as sort of a test bed.
Yes.
Um, and kind of what just hurts the most is how in second edition RDP, its really only drawback was that you didn't get any of the generic ones, but that was fine. You could work with them because generally speaking, your units were above average, so you didn't care too much about reroll ones to hit or whatever. But then the
Rerolling
rules have now
charges hurt.
changed.
Rerolling, not being able to reroll charges really hurt the army.
That yeah,
I mean,
that's
that
pretty
was a
brutal.
trade off. But go on.
Yeah, yeah, no, that was pretty brutal. Yeah, so like those parts of it were definitely borrowed from Ossiarch Bonereapers, and then now the system has changed around them. That's the thing I find most fascinating. They didn't change all that much about the book, but the system changed around them just in such a way that their abilities were both no longer powerful or special, and then also actively kind of crippled the army um, compared to other
Well, I
armies
mean, even
at a
if you look in
similar
faction
tier.
right now with Soulblight Gravelords, you're looking at an army that's firing on all cylinders for all intents and purposes. Like they're using, I was trying to communicate this in 2.0. This is what made me, by the way, the most dangerous man in Age of Sigmar. Is I went on Warhammer Weekly and I kind of defended Ossiarch Bonereapers in the state, and was 100% correct. Everybody, like fucking hell, time has proved me right on that one about how like the draw, like I'm like this is like you have to understand the big thing I was sticking to is I'm like there are armies out there that just get allegiance abilities. Like they just like exist and they have smashin' and bashin' or grave sites like with Soulblight Gravelords, or they just have a sheet says allegiance abilities, exploding sixes. There's just armies that do stuff. Some of them do stuff and have a resource. Ossiarch Bonereapers, the allegiance ability was our relentless discipline, and then party to that, we got immune to battle shock, which is still great, by the way. Like it's great. I would play the army if that was the only rule they had, quite frankly. Um,
Mhm.
and not because I think it's that super good. I think there's plenty of ways, especially in the MSU meta, to play around with the battle shock phase. I just don't think even now the battle shock phase is a fully fleshed out uh, phase of the game. Um, it's sorry, it's by the way, I don't even think it has a place in the hot take incoming. I think you could remove the battle shock phase from the game of Age of Sigmar and little would be missed. Um,
I don't actually disagree with you on that. It's definitely feels like a legacy mechanic. Um, that they've it's always kind of been there, so they're loath to remove it.
mhm,
Um, but once you get past a certain point, anybody you play with is always planning for ways to get around it.
mhm.
Um, you know, uh, you keep a CP in your back pocket if you feel like bravery is going to become an issue. A large chunk of the unit's wiped out or something like that. It's more kind of something than, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way towards people just starting, but like it becomes sort of an amateur mistake to watch a unit collapse from battle shock.
Mhm.
Um, and but as
I
you
like the way you
as you
phrase
play
that.
more, as you play more, it's like it almost never comes up.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't necessarily disagree that it could go away, or and no one would miss it, or they'd need to replace it with something a lot more interesting and engaging than just do
Ro-
some simple addition and
yeah,
subtraction.
do some weird math and then like a couple extra models go away sometimes. Like it's just where like even the scale of like how much models are capturing at right now. It's not even like with monsters, for instance, just monsters in Elite just arbitrarily like just having new values. Like oh, these capture at 10, these capture at 5, these capture at 20 or 30. Like it's the gap between like D6 and arbitrary value. It's so nominal for the time sink and the sort of minimum impact it's kind of having in the game. Yes, I know sometimes it comes down if they don't shock. If I roll a 1 versus a 2, I keep the objective. I know those situations occur, but they're like, you getting double turned and losing a game that like you made worse decisions up until that point to where you were in that predicament to begin with is also a
Mhm.
thing too. Like it's not a defense. It's not a defense argument for this like that system occurring. Like make some.
Oh,
I want them to either make an entirely different, call it the cleanup phase or the overrun phase or literally anything else. I don't know why my game about gods and angels and demons and humans that are thrown down on lightning bolts that can't die are getting scared of crap and running away. I just
yeah, I was kind of hand waved it as like attrition,
sure.
because there are certain, actually I think they call it attrition rule. I think they do in 40K now, specifically for that reason, just because the idea of a space marine running away in terror is too funny to contemplate.
Like
But yeah, I agree with you. the mechanic itself is so simplistic, and I don't necessarily want to go back to the way it was, where you have to run towards the closest board edge or whatever. Nobody wants to go back to that.
No, except for
So
Magos.
as it stands now, it's a bit of a legacy mechanic that they just seem to load to remove because it's always been there. So
I think
why
there's
should we remove it?
yeah the nostalgia goggles again, like reimagine it, do something else. Like I like bravery bomb mechanics. I like interplay with a bravery statistic. I either want more or I want the band-aid ripped off, and that's where I'm at.
And actually, just to reply to Magos, I think he is right that against horde armies, it is sort of like in some ways it does work as it functions as a balancing factor in the turns that it works. If you're going up against a couple 40 dude blobs, then if he has to make one has to make two different saves and only has one CP anyway, but he can only he can only do that on once per phase anyway. He's going to have to pick which one's more important. So
Sure.
there are certain situations that does come
Yeah,
up.
yeah. Well, I mean, but like if the intent of it is to throttle horde, they have other levers for that, don't they? I mean, like right now with the way that we have reinforcement points, you're kind of only rocking one blob anyway. Some armies get like two medium blobs, but
Yeah.
there's so many other levels to throttle horde.
There
Make it
probably are more elegant solutions to it
so
than
yeah.
than
I mean, I'm with
relying on this single dice roll.
yeah. I'm like you saying it's a legacy mechanic. I think is the kind of like the better way of putting it than my like my long tirades. But yeah, yeah. So us sort of resetting it back to Ossiarch Bonereapers. Like this army is a 100% brand new army for Age of Sigmar, right?
Yeah.
When I was asked, and I as Soulblight Gravelords were coming out, like 100% on board, hyping Soulblight Gravelords, as someone who did sort of start with LON, technically Grand Alliance Death, and I was mid building my army when the Battle Tome came out, so I was like, cool, more candy. Like it Soulblight Gravelords felt like a love letter from Games Workshop to me. The joke right now is that in a Tyler Durden fashion, I am James Workshop, because just like all of my like fantastical thoughts, like I must go to sleep at night, and then I like have a fake British accent and I call up like Ben Johnson. I'm like, oi, next. I don't know why I went Cockney there. Like, I always start with oi. Yeah, like I just call him up and like, oi, release vampires, like, and just whatever. Like, no, I'm all in on like Soulblight Gravelords. The way I look at it is like you have a forever home and you have like a vacation home or a couple vacation homes. Some people only have vacation homes. They don't have like that one army they stick with. Death is, the joke is, death is my forever home. But, as Soulblight Gravelords were coming out, I kept talking about like the Ben Kingsley speech from Lucky Number 11, a rabbi who's a gangster, is that like a grass is always greener sort of thing? And I'm like, no, I live on both sides of the fence and the grass is always green. Like I love my like the Bone Zone and the Soulblight Gravelords equally. And then like when Soulblight Gravelords left the room, I'm like, actually it's you, you're my favorite. To Ossiarch Bonereapers. And the reason I come down that way is because I love like vampires and it's just categorically and folklore and stuff like that. I think they're cool. I think they're dope. Twilight ruined it for a little bit for me, but then I realized that Twilight didn't ruin it for me. It was the discourse around Twilight, and I grew as a person, and I'm like, I actually don't care about Twilight. There's tons of crappy fiction out there. Why is this the hill everyone's dying on?
To this day, I still see memes making fun of Twilight, and I'm like, you need to get over it.
Yeah,
It's
get over it.
it's been a decade.
Yeah, like I mean, there's really like we're still circling back to this. Anyway, like yeah, for a while there, I kind of distanced it, and then I came back. And the point is that I can get vampires in any setting. I love the Warhammer Age of Sigmar spin to stuff. Like I've always been a big fan of like how they've spun their stuff, the wackiness, the turned to 11, the grim dark or tongue in cheek, like that. They have this like sort of like ballet that they go through of shifting things from like super tongue in cheek to sometimes super like hard boiled and super metal, and I love that ballet. Like I love that Warhammer does that dance. But I can get vampires for all intents and purposes anywhere else. I can't get Ossiarch Bonereapers anywhere but in Age of Sigmar. And I feel like as like a branding, as a game company, I'm like, they gotta care about this 100% trademarkable thing in a way that they would Stormcast. You know, when they came out, they were sold as the Dark Mirror to Stormcast, right? And I looked at the models. I'm like, yep, that Xantos looks like whatever the I always forget his name.
Just pick a random name. There's like 80 of them.
Yeah, whatever. They all words are
Sorry,
made up.
my brain still hurts from reviewing the Stormcast Battle Tome and just like looking at the table of contents and just seeing night, Lord.
See, tangent number 2. If you're playing the RantCast drinking game, everybody. When I was learning to play AOS with Haywo, I could never remember Stormcast names for any of the units.
To this day, I can't.
They're all like you could sit me down in a classroom and try to like with the freaking board and a pointer and everything, and I will not be able to remember them. They're just gibberish, fake Latin to me, and I'm like,
a friend of mine plays Stormcast Eternals, and to this day, I still can't remember any of his units. So like when I'm targeting one, I'll be like, that guy,
yeah.
And he knows he can have me because he's like, you got to say the name. I don't know what you're talking about unless you tell me what the name is.
Vandus Hammerhand. Thank you, Magos. Thank you, Chat Gang. You always have my back. Yeah, Vandus Hammerhand. Yeah, because the whole joke was like, it was like with the scroll, the scroll like model, the little skeleton with the scroll on Catacross's base is, you've got a missive from Vandus Hammerhand, my lord. He says you're a bitch. Like, and then like, was the Catacross looking over the battlefield, send a missive back to him and tell him he ain't shit. Like that's sorry. No, it's yeah, like so Ossiarch Bonereapers, it feels like for them to kind of forget about them or leave them out in the wind or use them as a test bed, and then like, I guess you did write your article on them before the September FAQ. Now that they can sort of run a couple models, or you know, plus or a couple models, do you have a more? I guess we should kind of go back to the beginning. What was your general read on Ossiarch Bonereapers? We've been talking about RDP. We've been talking about some other stuff. Like your general read. What was your general read in the article? And sort of maybe has the FAQ in September changed your read a little bit? Have you reassessed? I know you've got some stats on them too. Like, yeah, where are you at? Yeah, so what, you know, if you want to give us a quick synopsis of what your article was on Goonhammer, and then sort of what your read was then, what your read is now.
So right now we're working on a series of faction focuses, which are basically just sort of like really mini getting started guides for someone who is looking to get into a faction and might not know, you know, how does the army play? What does what's to buy? Because depending on what you're looking at, that can be overwhelming. And sort of some list direction. And the first one I did for the new edition was Ossiarch Bonereapers, because that's the army I was most familiar with. So I felt easy to just stretch my typing fingers and go at it.
Right.
That ended up being a mistake because I think that not counting the new armies that just got their tomes, Ossiarch Bonereapers saw the most radical shift in terms of rule changes between the FAQ and what kind of came afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that the change that they made was one of my suggestions, and I felt like it was the least intrusive suggestion, because my feeling has been that the FAQs, their job is generally not to rewrite rules, except for the times that they do. But they tend to be there to interpret the rules as best they can and just kind of make the most of it. And the way that the rules were,
like the minor adjustment in the sale, it changes.
You want a massive overhaul, you wait for a battle tome. That tends to be how it works.
Right.
But OBR, like they at least, I give them credit, they acknowledged there was a problem and worked on it. The ability to use the same command ability multiple times but not on the same unit, and each unit could only still receive and give one, that was one of my suggested changes, and I think that it was the least intrusive one, and I still think it was the right call.
Absolutely.
Because, for example, like Mortec Guard, if they can't get their shield wall off against a decently powerful enemy, they almost certainly will melt. A 4-up save on battle line is pretty good, but it's gonna get carved through with the right stuff. So the fact that I don't have to choose which one will do shield wall now, Relentless Advance is now at least it's actually better than it was before, because last edition it explicitly was once per turn no matter what. But then when they introduced this rule change, they had taken that out and decided to stick with it, which I also think it's a tough call whether or not that was a good call, because I don't think it's overpowered, mostly because the rest of the army is sort of weighed down by its own problems. If the army gets stronger, it may need to be looked at again, because it basically eliminates the army's what should be the army's primary weakness, which is
Mobility.
movement.
Yeah. No, I mean, if I can just, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I like where you're going with this. For me, Ossiarch Bonereapers, I love them as this inevitability army. You know, like where like they have a plan and it's a boulder down a hill type thing. Like once it gets momentum, once they get to where they gotta go, they will just outlast you, outgrind you. Like they will win, right? The thing becomes disrupting their trajectory, stopping them from rolling, getting rolling, so on and so forth. That's a fun dynamic for that army. It feels one of the best things for me when I started playing Ossiarch Bonereapers was actually feeling like a general. I loved that. I felt like I was, for like the first time in a long time, I wasn't just making like regular table decisions. I was a general of my army, making very like RDP was an empowering, like this is where like I didn't feel bad that the whole game got our cool thing, because now everyone has as much fun every time as I was having playing my army. I feel like a lot of the animosity towards Ossiarch Bonereapers wasn't that they were overpowered. People were saying they were overpowered. They were wrong, but they were saying they were. But the animosity was coming from like standing out, like outside in the rain, looking in at the feast I was having of being a general and like having a snifter of brandy and like pointing at my troops and just having the most fun ever. I feel like the armies, they lost a little bit of that, but got a little bit of it back too, because what you were going with you can't like shield wall and bludgeon, so you got to choose between offense and defense on that turn.
Yeah, that's been a big one, and that at least I give him credit for giving some choice in like threat assessment. It's like, okay, can I put bludgeon on these guys instead and not risk being wiped on the counterattack? Or should I just play it safe and do shield wall? So that does at least, it is one of the things that I really like, because it does give a sort of risk assessment that might otherwise be lacking. So I actually did like that part.
Yeah, there's a good change. I'm sorry, I cut you off mid there of the point on RDP and generalship, but
yeah, I think generally speaking, my thought now is I'm not even really looking at the power of it so much, the lack of the generic command abilities. It does hurt really bad if you're going up against a range army and you can't pop all out defense. That's almost explicitly what that was made for. And it hurts to not be able to do that. And so, but there's also some stuff like, some of the stuff is fun. It's, you have stuff like redeploy, which has a strong tactical component to it. And now using your analogy, now I'm the one who feels like I'm outside looking in, and I get to see the opponents get to do cool things like redeploy or all out defense, and I'm just like, I want that.
Yeah, you're just like looking at. I mean, it's
why are my tactical skeletons unable to figure out the idea of shuffling back a few feet?
Yeah. I or Nagash, how come in Soulblight Gravelords he can give them hell, like someone tries to run up on him and he's like, and he gives them the stink eye and they explode. But like when he goes over to Ossiarch Bonereapers, the more tactical, or he just forgets how to do it. Like,
yeah, and that has had some changes. Like what was it? Like one of my big ones was I said I still like the Mortek Crawler in the faction focus, but my opinion is sort of soured on it. Because the lack of rend now in a world with
stacking.
Mystic Shield, all out defense like that. It's like I've had a couple of games where it's like it literally just comes and does nothing, and I'm like, that's 215 points that are better spent elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah,
So there is also too, like, in addition to the fun part, there is just there's sort of an inherent imbalance from um, all out attack and all out defense not being the Ossiarch Bonereapers purview.
Heavy D6. He had so many good tactics that he can't think of one on the spot. Yeah, that's what it is. And Magos's
Performance
point.
anxiety.
Yeah, performance anxiety. Yeah, right. Magos saying it's a full combined arms army, not just a monster and some dudes. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, no, I love Ossiarch Bonereapers. I'm always going to stand it. I have an implicit. Actually, at this point, I think it's an explicit bias. Get at me. I love this army, and I love my Soulblight Gravelords. So, what are I guess you say the change for RDP was like the correct one. I think many of us in the Ossiarch Bonereapers community, this is kind of what we wanted. We're like, okay, so we can't use the generics, but we can spam ours. Cool, awesome, like, NASA launch room, like, congratulations, we're all shaking hands and high-fiving. The other one was Petrifex Elite kind of got changed to the suggestion we had made all along when the original conversation for Petrifex Elite came up. Shouldn't be +1 save, it should ignore 1 rend, right? And it's the good version of ignoring 1 rend. Like it's not just like ignoring only -1 rend; it reduces
Yeah.
1 rend. So it's the good version. Not as good as +1 save army wide, but meaningful. And there's not a non-bow with our shield wall, which is I think, I mean, if
Yeah.
if we move forward with this army, that's kind of what I want to see with Petrifex Elite. I've always maintained the bludgeon was the issue, never the +1 save. Like, why isn't that on
Oh yeah,
Ivory
the bludgeon
Host?
is great.
Why is the most defensive army the one that has the offensive component like to it? Like that's always been just the thing that I've always, even when I was standing super hard on Warhammer Weekly, the day I became the most dangerous man in Age of Sigmar, like it was like even then it was like the Ren seems to be the problem here, not the defense. Blah 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 blah. Petrifex Elite, it's justified by the fluff. Games Workshop doesn't seem to want to change it, and honestly, once I heard their like justification in the rules, they think, whether they're right or wrong too, people can have their opinion. They think that the Rend is their identity. They describe them as SEAL Team 6 coming in and like late to the battle and just obliterating what's left. That's what the Petrifex Elite. And they do have some credence given to the fluff flavor narrative of an army, right? Um like so okay, that's here to stay. The -1 Ren seems to be in the right place. Is there meaningful choices to Staliarch Lords, to Mortis Praetorians right now? We don't talk about the other ones, the other two, but
Yeah. Mortis Praetorians, I think that I mean, the problem is that they're saddled with I Mortis Praetorians. I have actually tossed that around back and forth in my head because I bring Catacross to every game. I jokingly call him my large bone son, and I love him. So bringing Mortis Praetorians, like I could get that +1 save back if I brought them. That's an argument for it. But the command ability is a little more niche. Reroll hits on the counter charge is pretty good. I won't lie about that.
especially with more rerolls
But
being kind of like stripped from the game.
right. But it's also not as useful to Ossiarch Bonereapers because it's pretty easy to get a lot of your army up to 2-ups to hit anyway. So when you slot that in next
You have
to
3 different easily accessible ways between the helm of the helm of the Ordained, I think it's called, or the helm of the it's for the Cavalos helmet, +1 to hit within a radius. You've got Catacross, and you've got a spell. Like you've got,
yeah
you can just, this army hands out +1s like Bowie handing out high fives in Ethiopia in the
and
South
the
Park episode.
and this and the Soul Mason's unique spell, Soul Guide. You can cast it pretty reliably twice a turn, and that's reroll ones. So when you already got a 2-up, that's basically just reroll all misses anyway. And Staliarch Lords, I've seen some fun stuff with that. That's something I'd like to try one day, but it would also require me to buy an uncomfortable amount of Cavalos Death Riders. So I haven't quite gotten to that point, but someday I will.
I mean, Mortec Guard running and charging is pretty good too. It's not just the Cavalos. They do miss out on the having to be mounted for the retreat and charge, which is like the best ability, right? Like that's the good that's the good stuff. Although the prospect of Nagash queuing up like a Kamehameha or whatever, charging forward and then just exploding it like off a run and charge, and then retreat charging over somebody and queuing up another 7 arcane bolts and a mystic shield is freaking hilarious.
Yeah, everybody, when it comes to the fun faction, everybody immediately goes to crematorians, and I understand that. But you can do some real batshit fun stuff with the Staliarch Lords.
Crematorians is one of those ones where I wish their ability was in Soulblight Gravelords on the zombies.
Yeah, if you had exploding zombies,
I
oh my god, that would be incredible.
like
The problem is with Ossiarchs is that you're such a low model count. You as fun as blowing stuff up is, you don't get it as much as you'd like.
yeah, and you're not yeah.
You don't want that to happen.
Yeah,
because every model's precious.
Yeah, it's one of my other problems with Battle Shock. Rolling the 6 or rolling boxcars should never feel bad in a dice game. It should always feel awesome when you roll the big number. And like it's a little bit of that, like when your stuff is dying in an elite army, it sucks. So you shouldn't feel like the it sucks thing shouldn't be the rewarding thing. Like there's sometimes it's like, okay, think of it as a consolation prize, and I'm like, well, I don't want the consolation prize. I want more fun. Like I want more candy. Give me more candy with my rules. My rules should be candy, not not feels bads.
Yeah, if you want to have fun blowing yourself up, go play Gits.
Sure, or like Skaven. Skaven are like hilarious for that. Like there's a fun way of doing that. Like if it's Necromancer Corpse Explosion dot army, that can be a lot of fun. Hordes have already kind of been throttled back a lot just with how reinforcement points work and coherency now. Like they're not as hurting as things on bigger than 25 mil bases, but like a lot of the games sort of like the MSU just shift the way that the objectives are more spread out. Like the game is just decentivized mass horde armies, 120 gits dot army. A lot of that's been decentivized kind of across the board. Don't get me wrong. I see you Soulblight Gravelords players out there wanting to bring 180 zombies. I see you, and I approve, but don't ruin it for everyone else.
Over here, I'm saying good riddance.
Yeah, good riddance. Yeah, I think one of the best changes to AOS 3.0, I think was reining down our model count a little bit. I actually think that's a good thing.
Yeah, no, I kid. I can see the appeal for large hordes. I've always been more of a elite army player. I like it when my individual stuff is awesome. But I totally can see the appeal. And I think it's at a good balance right now. There's still the concept of a horde may have been redefined, but it's still there. And if you want to move blobs of guys around, there are armies to do that.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what it should be, right? It should be that everyone has a sort of avenue to play the way that they wish to play this game. It's such a broad game with a lot of there's just a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on. Everyone should have like a little bit of this, a little bit of that for everyone, right? Like there should be, the reason I like Ossiarch Bonereapers so much is because honestly I was getting fatigued pushing around 120 skeletons. Like going to tournaments, which is where I like play most of my games. Like if I'm not, when I'm playing games that aren't tournaments, they're usually preparation games for tournaments to hashtag get better, get good, get my reps. Like that's pretty much how I play AOS. It was, going to tournaments, playing 5 games, pushing around 120, unless that's the thing you love, it gets fatiguing. I would rather have as much fun, but push around 60 models. And that was exactly what Ossiarch Bonereapers was to me. It was like literally the army I loved in LON, just condensed down. And, with its own trade-offs and stuff like that. And I loved that. That's why I just jive with this army so much. So you mentioned Relentless Discipline points. What else do you think this army needs? Like, is it a total rewrite? Is it a Wave 2 Battle Tome? Like, is it another rewrite to our Legion's ability? What do they need access to generic command abilities? Like, what does the army need? Because we have reversed my own metaphor. We're a little bit on the outside of the glass looking in at everyone.
Yeah, no, I hear you. No, I think I've thought about it, and like initially, I said my thought was that I prefer to compared to the current state, I'd prefer to just drop RDP entirely and go back. But that's not really what I want. I like that mechanic. It does, like you said, it makes me feel like a general to just have a stack of coins and be able to toss them out on separate things. I think what would help is probably having more reactive options, because that was really the name of the game with the generic command abilities in 3.0.
Mhm.
The idea was to have more stuff to react to your opponent, so you didn't feel like you were just sitting there and taking it. Uh, and that's where OBR, just like that's where the feels bad comes in. You know, your opponent gets ready to levy 60 shots at you from Snake Ladies. You just have to be like, well, let's hope that the rolls are good. So even if they don't give us the generic command abilities, I'd like our own list of them. And they could be
Just
different,
three, just
but
three different abilities, right? Like,
yeah, and make them like more reactive, because that was one of the selling points of 3.0, and I think one of the best ones. Hello, puppy.
yeah, that's Dobby. He's Dobby. Dobby is a free dog. We rescued him. We didn't name him.
Aw.
Yes, I usually don't have my door open. Sorry,
Yeah,
ganked by doggo.
it's fine. So in an ideal world, I think that would be my solution. Like if you're gonna keep RDP, which I think they're gonna, because that seems to be like a trademark of the army that GW is very proud of, just give more generic abilities, and particularly reactive ones, because I think that that was one of the best parts about Age of Sigmar 3.0,
Yes.
giving the player whose turn it's not something more to do. So give us stuff to do when it's not our turn.
I think that's perfectly stated. I think, I mean, I'm going to, you know, this is me, my Tyler Durden James Workshop thing here. I'm going to speak my will to the universe, and it's going to cave to it naturally. I'm hoping there is a wave to Ossiarch Bonereapers. You know, it's wishful. I haven't even heard rumors of this, mind you. Like, I don't, you know, have really. I know some insiders, but I don't really like ask them to break their NDA for my benefit. You know, I just whatever.
Yeah. So yeah, that's been one of my favorite questions to ask. Do you have a wish list? If there was a wave 2 of units, what type of things would you like to see in it?
See, this is where like I think a wave 2 could fix this, because I don't want RDP to go away. I like our different trade-offy style. I like having more of them, but in a more like limited or army specific capacity. Like I like that stuff. Like I don't necessarily want redeploy, and maybe there's an ability called no actually shield wall where it works against ranged, you know, like, and so one unit when you shield wall them can shield wall against ranged as well, like, you know, stuff just like, and please do name it that, Games Workshop. No actually shield wall, like, you know, the thing shields were designed for, like, fucking arrows. Like, yeah, no, like, I think that that's a really good proposal. Just give us three. You know, we've already got our movement shtick, so two more, right? You know, we've got our
Yeah.
+3 move. Give us two more reactive. Give us two reactive abilities. One of them does not need to be redeploy. Like, just two reactive abilities to maybe something that messes with magic, or I don't know. You know,
Yeah.
maybe reconfigure our sub allegiance ones to be more reactive, like, you know, the Mortis Praetorians where you're reacting and getting charged. Just something. I think that's a good two or three just reactive abilities. A good way to give us that is in a Wave 2 battle tome. You say, hey, ranks unbroken by descent. Right, with the exact same nomenclature that gives us our +3 move, they can use these three abilities as well. Plus what's on their war scrolls, plus what's on, you know. It doesn't feel like it would be game breaking. It feels like something that would be easy to really sort of like drip feed into the game without altering the game dramatically. My
Though I'm thinking as well too. Sorry, this thought just occurred to me when
No,
we were
no, go
talking
on.
about it.
No, this is
Because one of the selling points of Petrifex Elite has been their command ability, the bludgeon. With the new battle tomes that came out, it appears that they are decoupling command abilities from factions, because the sub factions are just bonuses now instead of
as it should be.
saddling you with anything else. And I think that that was a good call.
Better
But it's
design, yeah.
going to make me very curious what Petrifex Elite is going to look like if they're going to take away bludgeon.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and they don't need to. Again, they can just be candy. Like, so I like the direction they was for a while there. They had this like just misdirection, just the wrong path of thinking that playing an army without a sub allegiance was supposed to be a viable thing to do. No, just give people their candy, give them free rules. You know, how do you make Night Hunt better right now? Give them sub allegiances. Give them free rules. Like, done. Like, there's just fine free rules for everyone. Is it bloat? Whatever. Why would I care? If it's fun, if it's more fun for everyone, just do it. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
You're already.
I wish I could have been a fly on the wall, because I can kind of figure what direction they were going for with that whole, like, you can take a sub faction, but you must pay a price,
Yeah.
in the form of the command traits and the artifacts. I can kind of understand what they were going.
Yeah. Yeah. We wait for your camera to catch up. Soren dropping in with a
player with
sorry, you lagged out there for a second. Soren with a tier 3 sub.
Yeah, it's okay. I should
20...
allow them to play around with it first.
For 25 years. Thank you so much for the sub, Soren. Thank you so much, Mad Lad. Good evening from Texas. Good evening to Texas. Sorry. So, you kind of you kind of lagged there for a second.
I apologize.
No apologies necessary. Disgusting. The trade-off, the fly on the wall. Sorry, I was resetting back to what I was remembering before the lag happened. Where they thought it had to be a trade-off, what it ended up doing was creating a little bit more, like, that was yet another opportunity for have and have-nots, right? Like, and it was one of those things that looked like the illusion of choice, but then it wasn't a choice. It caused the whole fiasco to begin with how the best one was, right? Like, just...
Yeah.
If my sub-allegiance isn't as good as the best one, but I'm not being punished for taking it, in a different way from all the other ways all the other stuff is being punished, it feels like more of a choice. Ivory Host isn't going to get picked for as long as it has a drawback compared to anything, even if its mechanics are good, because there are entire sub-allegiances out there in the entire game that just give you bonuses, right? Like, what a weird misfiring. But hopefully they're moving away from that now with 3.0 and everybody. Again, just give them candy. Sub-allegiances are the way. Everyone gets free shit. Cool. I'm cool with it. I don't care. So I think that back to this Wave 3 wish list. Wave 3, for me, is a like an LRL thing, or a Broken Realms. They release another book. I will buy the limited edition for that, complain that it's obsolete in a month, but I will still do it, knowing full well that it will be obsolete in a month, and then I'm overpaying for a literal paperweight. I don't care. Just give it to me. I will pay for it. So I get my Wave 2. It's got a couple new kits in it and some new rules. The new rules just expand on the rules that exist. Maybe they reconfigure sub-allegiances a little bit to where they're just candy, but they add 3 reactive abilities to the whole army. Everyone gets these 3 reactive abilities. Maybe the Mortis Praetorians reaction is moved into a generic, and everyone can do that, and they give something else to Mortis Praetorians. Cool, awesome.
Yeah.
Make Mortis Praetorians
I think that'd be a good call.
Make Mortis Praetorians the catapult army. Their new ability means their catapults get to, like, proc mortals, something, right? Like,
yeah.
So you can proc mortals off catapults. That becomes their sub allegiance user RDP ability, and everyone gets the reaction to charge rerolling thing. I don't care. What I want for models, I want bone chariots. Like, just give them to me. I don't care if they're crap. Make them look as awesome as ever, because they don't typically write good chariot rules. I don't care. They make good chariot sculpts. I need
Chariots
them.
Are cool.
I wouldn't mind archers. Hades asks, archers, yeah or nay? Yeah, I want more tech archers. I want more tech archers out of a purely list building stance, though. I want make them a unit of 5, make them decent. They don't need to be flipping sentinels. They can be a little bit closer to bliss barbs. Like, just give me a unit and make them cheap. That way I can get my 3 battle line and start to really mess around with my list building. And I want a proper bone monster. I won't begin to speculate on what type of bone monster. Like, just make it sweet. Like, a bone dragon would be preferred, like, categorically, like a dragon. But I'd settle for, like, a bone colossus, a bone Katamari Damacy, where it's just like a crazy ass, like, what was it, Legion from Castlevania, except made out of bones and super gnarly. Like, the Gothazar Harvester, like, it's a 2s or 9 model, right? You either love it or you hate it, right? It's either for you or it is not. There is no in between. We're like, it's all right. Everyone's like, firm, yes, awesome, and this is the coolest thing. No, I want them to do that with the next monster. I want it to be huge. I want it to
Hmm.
be on a pie plate. I want it to be ridiculous. Um, I would also
Yeah.
like a foot hero. That like play like a foot Morghast hero type thing, or a foot like stalker slash Immortus guard type hero. That is just like a. I know it's like the undesirable kind of crap army slot to have just like a foot slogging hero, but I would really like some sort of like foot liege type unit, some foot something that's designed to uh be sort of like follow around some Morghast and stalkers, kind of be a little like a mini blender, like on its own, that like just skirmishes around and goes out with a satellite unit and just tries to slap stuff around. Like I want something like that. A melee foot assassin. Yes, I'm the one person on the planet asking for a melee foot assassin. If it's like, imagine like a heroified Morghast, like that. You talked about like the angel demons, the sort of Catholic iconography and all that stuff earlier on. Like, man, it would be cool if there was like a Morghast just with our new sculpting technology that was like really cool and was named. Please, no more wizards though. I kind of agree. Um, they could rewrite
It was
Reaper.
very weird that there were three wizards and then really only one martial hero. I'm not counting the fact that there's a named variant, but
Right.
that there was the one Leech Cavalos, and that really was it.
What I'm saying is, give me a another unit to put a melee artifact on.
Yeah.
Like, just
Yeah.
give me another unit to slap a melee artifact on. I want something like that. I do like Mirkainen right now. I think Mirkainen's actually like an interesting purchase for the army. I think you were talking about your 400 points of going with your Galthazar Harvester. That's kind of where I put like Mirkainen kind of is going in my in the unit is kind of going in my slot in my sort of pat slot right now. Been playing around with that.
I haven't had an opportunity to try it, but it seemed interesting based off of what I read.
Yeah. Imagine a Chinese style dragon but with many legs like a centipede, but its legs are all the crotch skeletons.
Crotch
Yes.
skeletons,
Yes.
metal as
You
hell.
might have said that to be like hyperbolic and like be like, wouldn't this be too weird? No, not too weird. I would love it. I would love that shit. If I have nightmares picking up the sculpt and it's all bones and gnarly, oh, yes, give it to me. More horror. Yeah. Same question. What do you want? What's your wish list?
You managed to hit everything I wanted. It's I guess great minds think alike in that respect.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, the ones that have always been on my mind are I love a proper monster just because I'm someone who loves centerpiece models. You know, I
Yes.
said I got in on the gosh, so I want like a big bone golem that I can just slap down in the center of the field and kind of smacks things around.
Yeah.
Um, archers, it would be good just for the battle line versatility because
Yes.
right now, your Mortec guard are really your only go to. Cavalos Death Riders have their niche, and I bring along a squad of five. They're great for outflanking, grabbing objectives, things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, my Mortec are my kind of my core of my army, and at least having archers would be a very different niche
Mm-hmm.
that they could fill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and an on foot martial lord because it's very odd that they made three wizards and not one marshal that was on foot. If nothing else, it would be great to have him, and then he'd be able to be at a little bit of a discount as opposed to the Liege Cavalos.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be cool. Like when you're like, oh, I could take a full Liege Cavalos, but like here's this cheaper, not quite as good thing. Like, cool, whatever. It gives rerolls instead of
Yeah,
+1 attack. Like, or not
yeah,
necessarily rerolls, a Ren debuff or a hit debuff, whatever it is. Something, that says this isn't quite as good as just like straight up +1 attack, but like, or whatever. Like, I don't know. It doesn't have to be on the high end scale of like the best buffs ever. Just something
yeah.
in the
Not
middle.
everything needs to be new and meta defining, and that's what leads into power creep. So
Right.
sometimes it's just fun to have options.
Yeah, options and just live within your space, right? Like this army has such a strong design core. If you want to go grab another drink, I can easily pad for time and talk to
No,
chat
I'm
game.
good.
Okay. I've already refilled my glass like 3 times. This army has like such a strong identity. I think it's really easy to explore space with it without having to redefine it or rewrite like sort of. This is not an army that needs a total revamp, right? Like it's already
Yeah,
new and kind of made for the game. It's just 3.0 and it have there's just a little bit of lacking. They're just not quite on the same page, and I think it's easy to get them on the same page. I'll bring you
Yeah,
in.
there's a very clear design intent with them, and I think in second edition the design intent worked because it was designed around that game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like you talked about earlier, there was when they launched, there was so much fear that, oh no, this is going to be the new broken army that guy plays, and it's going to bust everything open. And the next few tournaments that we got before lockdown, they had a very high representation, but not the rankings you would have expected. Um,
Yeah,
and ultimately they were in a pretty good place. They were very good, but they didn't crack the meta open quite the same way that Zinch and Seraphon were doing at that time.
right.
Um,
Or DOK before it, or
uh,
Slaanesh before it, or Feck before it. Like when those real well, I don't even put the onus on Slaanesh in terms of that. Feck kind of that the always strikes first meta. That was the Feck did that. Like that redefined the meta, and then Slaanesh just said king me, right, moved across the board and like in checkers, like in,
yeah.
so I credit Flesh Eater Courts for that last sort of surge in the activation in that. But yeah, you're right. Like Ossiarch Bonereapers didn't really like redefine the meta in any of those main terms. They were tough to beat, and if you were bringing your list from before they came out and you didn't have render mortar wounds, you're gonna have a bad time. Like if you just didn't have those things in your list and
Yeah.
you obstinately were like, no, I'm not changing my list for the new army. I've played this army for 3 years and it's always been good. Like until that army came out. Like just put the Rendclaw on your stupid Maw Crusher. You'll be fine. Like, come on. Sorry.
Mhm.
just yeah, no, they were in a decent spot. The representation aspect of it, I have a hypothesis here. It hasn't been tested, but I think we can test this. Death seems to have this migrating 10% representation, and it just seems to displace. So as an army with, or a Grand Alliance with 4 armies, the thinnest in the game, um,
Mhm.
we sort of have this like all the whole game has this what I call like a recency bias where people want to play the new stuff. Death players seem to be pretty hardcore. They want to play death stuff, but they'll buy the new death stuff, and they just kind of like shift around. So you look at like I think Soulblight Gravelords was sitting at like 6 or 7% representation, like
Yeah.
as of the most recent statistics. You can watch the
Something like
number
that. Yeah.
shift from Ossiarch Bonereaper representation over on to like it was just this little thing where I've watched this sort of migrating 10% where there's always this like odd 10% that just shifts around in the death numbers. And Ossiarch
Mm.
Bonereapers just kind of caught all of it at the time once, and it was funny. So that's just
Yeah. I
my
I
tinfoil
got
hat.
into I got into OBR because at the time Legions of Nagash, the book was getting long in the tooth, um, and I wanted something that was a little newer, um, and I didn't get to. Unfortunately, I didn't get to play them much because COVID came so shortly after. But um, I had picked them up, and I think that there's probably a lot of people who were like me who were doing the same thing. They wanted a Death Army, but they wanted one that was a little more current.
Yep.
Uh, Night Haunt and Flesh Eater Courts weren't for them, so they went with OCR Bonereapers. And then now that the Soulblight Gravelords book is back, and that's pretty much the successor to Legions of Nagash, and it's very good. A lot of those people are probably kind of coming
Yep.
home, coming
Yeah.
back to where they
Oh,
were.
100%. That's literally the migrating 10% I'm talking about. It's the people who played LON. That book was bad when it came out. I know it's a headline to everyone now in the future, but
Nobody was playing them, so they don't know that.
well, no, hey, it was Ian from Just Play and me were like two of the only people on the TGA forums. Like the LN book is bad. It's just like held aloft by 2 great units, and one of them's not even from within their own book. Like I'm like, this is not a great book. It was great fun, but like good design and what you love. This is there's a difference between the best movie and your favorite movie, right? There's a difference between the best video game and your favorite video game. Like these are two different things. Like it could be your favorite battle tome for a bunch of reasons. It certainly had a lot going on. There's a lot to identify with and like grab onto and just like love. But like from a design, there's so much bloat. The way that they was 4 different armies and then 2 other armies because the Grand Alliance was in there as well, and Soulblight specifically. But then you also had Legion of Blood and Legion of Night. Like the way that whole thing came together didn't quite have sub allegiances. Like it felt like an alpha test for 2.0. And then like
it is a fascinating book to read in that respect.
yeah.
So many baffling design decisions are going on in there. I think what you said, an alpha test for 2.0.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it wasn't quite the same as like you look at the tomes prior to it, like Sylvaneth, or you brought up Tzeentch's sort of first run. It wasn't quite like those ones. It didn't have like terrain in a meaningful sense the way that we had seen some faction terrain up until that point, and shortly after with IDK right around the corner, because it was Legions of Nagash, Daughters of Cain, IDK were all released right in that same run, right? Didn't you had these little coins you placed on the table? Is it a piece of terrain? No, it's a point in space. We just use this as you can move through it, and like having to give people that whole spiel about grave sites that back then
Mm-hmm.
felt like just brain breaking for people. Like trying to
Mm-hmm.
explain how our grave sites work to them, and they could block them and stop me from summoning my stuff, and everyone's shaking their fists at the sky when I'm bringing back a unit, and I'm like, you can just stand on the point, and then it doesn't come back. It's like right there. Like just stand on it or kill my general. You can just do either of those things. My general's a necromancer right now. You can just
You just breathe on it, he'll fall over. He's not getting back up.
yeah, like anyway, so yeah, there's or it's my dragon and I'm throwing my Vlasda into your units trying to clean up, so I'm a little bit out of position. I have to retreat back to my gravesite because you're crowding up the one advanced one. Come on. No. I don't want to get on my tangent of LON. Anyway, so LON felt like it was kind of like, it just was an incomplete thought to me at the time even. I loved it, don't get me wrong. I played for, that was my army for a whole year. I racked up the hardware on it, whatever. That was my army for a year. But then it was like that next GHB right after that book came out, it crippled everything. I remember going to Midwest Meltdown was the tournament right after that GHB came out. Would have been 2018. I think it was GHB 2018. They had upped the cost on Necromancer. They had hit Nagash again in the points. They just went around the army and they just kind of like mucked up a bunch of stuff. The Grimghast Reapers shot up. Even though I wasn't running them, it was like they hit Direwolves. They went through and like my army didn't function as it was designed. Like I had to basically buy half of a new army to work optimally. And when you do that to somebody where you're like, you have to buy half of a whole new army. Like I just started playing Friends armies in my Beast of Chaos for like that sort of like half a year after that. And then Ossiarch Bonereapers come out. So you had people like me, and this could be projection where my hypothesis comes from. That migrant 10%, that the migrating death friends, whatever they are, whatever nomenclature we give them, that sort of like migratory death, like we were like lost souls for like a 6-month period, and then Ossiarch Bonereapers came out, and we literally just bought OBR and started playing that. So that like the amount of people that were on LON, because like first off, finally Death had a battle tome that was like for them. I kind of crapped on LON, but it was like if you weren't on the Flesh Eater Courts plan and you didn't care about spooky ghosts, like what else did you play? It was everything else. It had your vampires, it had your skeletons, it had your Mortarks, it had all your other stuff. So yeah, we all played it.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I contemplated a lot before Soulblight Gravelords came out, because I was like, they put themselves in a weird position because Legions of Nagash, the other weird thing about it was how it was basically just not terrible Grand Alliance death. Like the Flesh Eater Courts are still separated, but everything else was thrown in there. And then for whatever reason with the Night Haunt, they were like, okay, let's throw in any of the Night Haunt that came in the Soul Wars box, but only those ones. Only those ones will be added. And so I remember with the Night Haunt tome, I'm like, well, now you have this problem where you have a book called The Legions of Nagash, but it's not all the Legions of Nagash. The Night Haunts are over here. And then the Ossiarch Bonereapers came out. Same thing. It's like, okay, now it's no longer the Legions of Nagash because they're over here now. And so I think the Soulblight Gravelords, it was an elegant solution to take out the ghosts and make them Night Haunts thing. And then they took out the Morghosts and Archon and put them into OBR. It gives each army a distinct theme, a thing that they can own. um, rather than this grab bag that Legions of Nagash was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I still think there's one blind spot in the army, and I'm not going to say Tomb Kings, but it's Death Mages. I think there needs to be a like if we get a new Death book down the line, assuming it's not something like totally out of left field, which I'd be fine with too. Like Ossiarch Bonereapers are kind of out of left field for me. I know they said that it was like the Tomb King's spiritual successor, and maybe they started at like on their whiteboard. They're like, okay, we need a Tomb King's army for AOS, and they wrote Tomb Kings on the left side of it. And then by the time they got to the other side, it wasn't A, B, C. They weren't just like 3 tiers deep. They landed somewhere else. For me, that's my read on it. I am one of the mods for the Cinderfall Gaming Facebook group, and we have questions when you join that group. Not that you have to answer it, like we still let people in if they don't answer it, but it was just enough to screen bots, basically, like as you see. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's the only Cinderfall Gaming group that has the questions to join, by the way, which is funny, and that's my direct influence. So I'm a monster and a gatekeeper. The one of the questions is like, why are you playing this army, or what got you interested in Ossiarch Bonereapers? And a lot of people still say, like identify as like, well, I like Tomb Kings in Total Warhammer, and so I want to play them over here. But Tomb King Tristan in here is like, for me, the only opinion I need on Tomb Kings is Tristan's, and there's a couple other folks out there that I defer to in like Australia and very like I've got a regional Tomb King representative that I'll consult with essentially, uh, and
Always good to have.
yeah, you got to have and for me it didn't they didn't land on Tomb Kings, and when I talked to Tristan, he's in agreement. Um, but so anyway, so not Tomb Kings. That's not the take. That's not where I'm going. If you want to modify your army to be Tomb Kings, Tomb King OBR, power to you. That's one of the things that make this game great. But for me, it's Death Mages, the sort of like liches and their creations and their like the pure necromancy aspect of it, where it's what kind of radical like corpse and bone and gnarly death constructs can be made with all the like reanimated dead. And yeah, we've got zombies because vampires are a little they're necromancy light. The thing that Soulblight Gravelord did for me, I think they did really well, is with the addition of Avenger Eye and Virkos to like the shuffle, they really fleshed out what vampires are in specifically Age of Sigmar. I know what a vampire is in Twilight. I know what a vampire is in Vampire the Masquerade. Like, I know what a vampire is in Bram Stoker's Dracula. And, like, cool, I saw, like, you can see people just love to do this thing. They're like, well, my vampires are like this, but different. Like, AOS asserted, like, no, these are vampires. This is Soulblight. And I thought that was a really cool move. Be my Frankenstein. Yeah. Yeah, mummies. Yeah, mummies are missing. I think mummies can show up in Death Mage real easy because for me, it's like the rampant death magic. That's the thing I want to see. If they crank it to 11. They do the, they do the KO thing where they just like, oh, you thought these were dwarves. Here's Aetherpunk Cloud dwarves, hyper capitalist dwarves with constitutions and stuff. Like, if they do that with Death Mages, hell yeah, I'm for it. If they're like Clan Scryer meets Clan Molder but Death. Hell yeah, go crazy. I think that's the missing spot is that. And I mean it raises an interesting question for Archon because Archon's, Legion is gone. It's not gone in the lore. He's still a Mortarch. He's not the Mortarch of Ossiarch Bonereapers. He got Null Myriad as a gift. He's Mortarch of he's the Sacrament. Where's the Sacrament right now? So, yeah, Mummy could be the priest. Yeah, Death doesn't have priests. It's the only faction without priests, which is super weird. Because there's no Death clerics out there, like, worshipping Death. There's no one doing last rites and rituals and stuff. Like, there's none of them anywhere.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite eccentricities in Soulblight Gravelords, because Nagash had that keyword for the longest time, but it didn't do anything. And I always found it weird that it was there. And then they took it out a couple moments before it actually would do something.
Yeah. Magos here is called me out. I feel seen. You want flesh golems from the Forsaken in Warcraft? I do want flesh golems from the Forsaken. Yes, that's exactly what I want. I want gnarly ass flesh golems and like the necromancers who will them around. I want the mortal cultists who worship death. You know,
Yeah.
that's what I want. I want that faction. I want the death mages faction. I want
And I think
basically.
that
Yeah, go ahead.
no, it's just that also enlightens like one of my favorite elements of the Age of Sigmar lore has been like um how these planes like usually in when you start coming into elemental planes, people start doing a D&D thing where like, oh, these are inhospitable. It's pure fire or whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
Um I love that Age of Sigmar has said that, these 8 realms are, that's what it is now. But uh mortals are going to continue to do their thing
yeah,
one way or another.
yeah.
And I love how, like, even in Shaiish, which is filled with death magic, there's still mortal humans living there. And sort of the insight into how living in these different realms changes people and um, their culture. And that's been one of the coolest parts that they've been exploring with Age of Sigmar in
Well,
the past couple months,
there's a,
years.
there's a very philosophical, sort of humanist like story to be told in it all, isn't there? Like a really sort of a deeply philosophical, like what does it mean if you take a human and you put them in these conditions? Are we still human? What makes us human is at the core of like a lot of great philosophy is like what makes us human, right? Like why do we exist? And you can tell these deeply philosophical grounded stories through the story of wacky dragons and death gods and giants who want to steal all your stuff. Like I mean, those are the most fun ways to tell those stories about what it means to be human, right? Like, why does Jack?
That's
Yeah,
that's been
yeah. Sorry.
yeah, sorry, that's been my favorite thing about Age of Sigmar in general is somehow it's taken this thing where there's so many disparate tones and so many uh, wild things that happen on such a epic scale, and yet somehow it all comes together and just kind of works.
Yeah,
It feels like it shouldn't, but it
yeah,
does work,
yeah.
and that's been one of the most like exciting things to explore about the universe.
Right, right. And like what you said, like seeing them all live there. Like Shaiish, humans live in Shaiish. The notion of like living with your dead great grandpa, who's like just a ghost now and chilling out, like it's such a cool idea. Where are the humans that are growing up in that setting? Like where
Yeah,
like what is like okay, you've got like all your ancestral knowledge that built the city of the dead that you live in, and you're just like you're going to work or whatever that might be. Like is it like, oh man, I gotta go punch in at the Church of Nagash and like worship him so he gets extra soul energy, like whatever it is, like you know I don't know what that looks like. I have ideas of how I would write some cool stories, but like I want to see what that looks like to the designers of Age of Sigmar who have, quite frankly, really good visual storytelling. I think the
sure,
best in the
sure.
business, which is why I think so many people gravitate towards our game. It's the models. The visual storytelling is just it's fantastic. What does that look like for the humans of Shaiish, or
Yeah,
the various death cults? So, I mean, another good analog might be Tech Priests of Mars, of what are they called? AdMech, Adeptus Mechanicus.
yeah.
Take out the technology. That's death, necrofied limbs and bones and shit. Boom. Like another way of like what death priests might be like. So, yeah, I had to get on my soapbox here for a minute. Bring me one more death army. That's what I want. I'm greedy. Give me all the death armies. Um,
Yeah,
uh,
for sure.
if Home Depot can sell a 12-foot skeleton, I think Death can get a giant skeleton outside of Laoshan. Preferably red, because red is the strongest of skeletons. We all know this from
Well, that's
all
that's
video
that's
games have
just
taught me that.
science.
Yeah, that's science.
That's just
Science,
science.
yeah, science. 30 years of science and 36 years of science and video games have taught me that red skeletons are the most powerful skeletons. Um,
For sure.
yeah. Yeah, Adeptus, yeah. Catching back up here. TK were dope. I'd love non-TK affiliated mummies. I think that would be really good. I agree with you there, man, Zach. Mummy Hero by way of Cairn, Wraith, or Banshee. Just someone shambling and cursing also would take a unit. Yeah, yeah. I'm on board with it. It sounds like everyone's kind of in consensus here. Vampire Mummy. When it bites you, you
Yeah.
become a mummy. Yeah. Um, so we wish listed on Ossiarch Bonereapers, State of Death. Do you think Age of Sigmar is like I'm looking over at like getting started. I'm looking over at 3.0, sort of the journey of like Goonhammer really coming into prominence with Age of Sigmar content. Do you think 3.0 is a good point to get in as a totally new player? Like I've had this for, I guess, to put my bias on the line here. Um, I've had this like suspicion sneaking around, or not suspicion. I'm curious. Are we too bloated? Is there too many mechanics? Is it too difficult to learn? Like, what's your perspective on this? Is it a good time to get into AOS?
I think so. I do think that because there was a lot of concern with the new the new generic command abilities, especially because they're reactive, um, which is very difficult for I think for a new person. Um, Learning when to react to certain things can be a challenge because you're trying to remember all this stuff that trying to pull that particular nugget of knowledge out at the exact second you need it isn't always easy.
Mhm.
Um, I think I think the game is still more accessible than 40k, at least from a list building perspective.
Okay.
It's sort of a little more clear about almost in most armies. It's a little more clear about okay, this is I need to take this and this and this
Hmm.
in order to have something that works, and you don't have to fiddle around with detachments. You can just kind of, as long as you fulfill your requisite units, you can go right in. Um, I think the command abilities you might need to like kind of ease people into that one because it is an extra to learn. But I think that Age of Sigmar sort of streamlines the onboarding process a little bit because a lot of the stuff that you need to remember is going to be based off of the units that you take.
Hmm.
The command abilities that
That's an interesting perspective.
the command abilities outside of your generic faction stuff are going to be tied to the war scrolls that you brought. Um, so it's instead of like 40k's method where it drops a whole bunch of stratagems on top of you and says remember all of these or be able to refer to these when you need them. Uh, you're you're sort of given a smaller pool of stuff that is just based off of the units that you took, which kind of helps make an association with them.
Hmm.
Like I can remember this guy does this and this guy does this, and so I want to kind of keep them together. And I
Right.
think that helps build those links in your mind about the best ways to remember what stuff does in the moment.
Right.
um, I suppose the only thing I think that Age of Sigmar has tried to chase and still hasn't quite gotten is that I think the game falls apart at lower point values more than 40k does. Um,
That seems
and
fair.
if you're playing a 1k game, like a lot of it has to do with the fact that because in Age of Sigmar you're buying units in bulk, you're not buying per model. Um, each unit you bring is a huge chunk of your army in 1k. Um, and so that loss can be devastating, especially if you end up going second on the first round and somebody just shoots something off the board. But at the same time, I think those 1K games are necessary for the ease of learning for a newbie.
Yeah.
They attempted to sort of counterbalance this with meeting engagements in second edition that didn't really work.
Right.
Um, I'd love something that makes the onboarding process easier, because for someone who's new to the hobby and hasn't gotten an opportunity to even know if this is the game they want to play,
Right.
you can't ask them to go out and buy 2,000 points of models in order to see what the game's really like. But
Right.
it doesn't sit with me well that if you play a 1,000 point game, you're not necessarily going to get a good idea of what the game's like.
It's very fair. And
Because
Warcry is a totally different thing. Yeah. Like.
yeah, Warcry is even different from Age of Sigmar than Kill Team is from 40k.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's just a totally different game. Um, no, no, you're right. Like, I mean, I don't have any answers for any of that, by the way. But it is. I going back to like just sort of resetting the thing I said earlier on, where when I started playing like Warhammer Fantasy Battle with my friend Sam, it was like I had just an assortment of stuff that I liked or could afford, right?
yeah,
And
sure.
and we just kind of had to like make up a game to play via some. I don't think they were called battle plans then. They're little things that came in White Dwarves, like little iconic battles and stuff, right? Like, um, and when we just went back, we had to do stuff like that. Like, I wonder if maybe something akin to that, but codified, could work. Like, Games Workshop just releases little 500 point like story battles or something that represents the game mechanically more in a one-to-one manner at a low scale than
Yeah.
these other whacked out games. Because, like, I mean, this is an objective game, and table size, being able to spread your models out to like contest objectives. You're not playing Age of Sigmar if you're just pushing your models and fighting stuff, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
how to get people to like internalize that as they're collecting their army. I played a lot with empty bases. I had Haywo, who had multiple armies even back then. He had his mixed order. He had Beasts of Chaos and Beast Claw Raiders, and he had like an entire Stormcast army, which he probably like keeps on the down low. No one wants to remember him as a dirty Stormcast player. No, he just won it. He had like his whole Stormcast army. So that's what I practice on. I practice on Stormcast, but I parachuted in. Here's a 2,000 point army, and then he broke the game down sort of like, this game we're just going to kind of focus on like movement and objectives, and this game we're going to like worry about like, you know, battle shock and all this. And he just kind of broke it down. I play tons of games. It's easy for me to pick up new games. There's like that sort of half life of games getting easier and easier the more you play, right? But you know, what about my kids? You know, my kids threw dice for the first time ever at Brew City Brawl, just like someone letting them roll hits and saves, right? Like, how do I help them get into this game? What if I do a lot of time, I spend a lot of time talking about Age of Sigmar on a podcast. Someone asked me, okay, well, what's a good place to start? I'm like, buy a whole army and play 2,000 points. Like, helping us facilitate getting people into this game. Warcry doesn't feel like for me, it doesn't feel like a good way to get people to play it. That feels like such a separate game.
No, it's basically a separate game that just happens to use the same models.
Excuse me 1 minute. I must close my door. These dogs are going to continue to bark.
Oh, absolutely. Let's see what the chat has to say. Hi, chat.
All right, there we go. Sorry about that. It's good to get people in getting into Wargame as a whole, in my opinion. Yeah, I mean that is a little bit of a decent concession there, D6, for like Warcry or whatever. It's easy enough for your family members to play. Shamelessly shill Goonhammer. Yeah, there you go. Goonhammer, Goonhammer.com.
Yeah.
Go to it, everybody.
The best site you'll ever read.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yeah.
But no, I think you came onto an interesting point though too. That in addition to needing to, it can be very difficult to learn how to play unless you have the models. But how do you know you like the game without buying models first?
Right.
So it would be an interesting thing if there could be like a more streamlined tutorial, like introducing new mechanics gradually. I think that if you buy any of the 2-player box sets, they tend to come with a little story mode that walks you through it, but it doesn't quite adequately do that. I would love a little more generic, like a video game tutorial, like game 1. In order to move your units, you measure from here to here.
Yeah.
And just like, because it's so overwhelming, and I think as players who've done this for a long time, we've internalized a lot of the rules. Take for granted how complicated it is.
Yes.
And since it's a competitive game, you're probably going to lose a lot too when you learn, and that can be demoralizing.
Yeah.
Unless you've got supportive friends, and that's sort of the other problem. Unless you have a good tutor, it's also a very difficult game to learn. So how to expand that branch a little bit.
Is that dissimilar from RPGs? Like, do you need a good tutor to get into like a tabletop RPG?
No, I think you do. Especially I think RPGs very much the same. With RPGs and also war games too, I guess there's certain kind of people who are good at reading rule books. Yeah. They can kind of go through real quick and like internalize how it works real quickly and be like, all right, I'm good to go. There are other people who need to learn by example. Have someone who knows the rules teach them how to do it. Mm-hmm. And I know that a lot of the people that I've seen come into role-playing games need to have like a, a teacher kind of explain to them. It's like, okay, well, now it's time for you to make a skill check. So what you're going to do is you're going to roll one of these
Right.
dice and add this number. They almost never have read the book
Or
until
they've read a class that they liked.
yeah,
Yeah.
they read maybe they read the fluff, maybe read a few abilities, said, oh, that sounds cool, but they don't necessarily know how it works mechanically. And ironically, I find the people that refer to the book the most are actually the ones who already know the game, and they just need to know exactly how an ability works.
Right.
It's great for people who need to know the nitty gritty of the writing, but it's not always the best tool for learning,
Right.
depending on the person.
Right. Right. So I mean, this is I think why there's like a physical resurgence with tabletop gaming, RPGs, board games, war games. Like we're seeing a resurgence, and it's been going strong for about a decade now of just like sort of record profits. Games Workshop is you can look at them as a microcosm. It's across the board, pun intended. Like board
For
games
sure.
are just the sort of board game market, broadly speaking, is just really hot and has been. I think almost correlating, not causally, obviously, correlating with the sort of like digital migration, this alienation that this soul sickness this generation has of feeling more and more alienated from means, more and more alienated from each other. Like we are ironically lonely, despite how more connected we are than we've ever been, and so I think that's caused people to sort of seek out reconnecting in a physical sense, and tabletop games is a great way to do that. We can't forget the human element in that, right? The
Yeah.
tutor mentality you talk about. But some people are, some GMs are great at teaching people games, but not necessarily great at running games, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't think I'm a particularly great teacher of RPGs. I think I'm a great GM, but like if you give me a brand new, never rolled a dice before in their life player who's like a 20-something-year-old, I met him in college and they heard I'm a nerd and now I have to teach them an RPG, like I don't think I'm great for that. Like I usually have like a player at the table, luckily, that's pretty good at like teaching someone who's new. I've taken for granted some of the people who've been in my games that like I underestimated the level of RPG that they'd had, and I didn't and just kind of like it was baptism by fire or whatever, or trial by fire, where they're just like thrown in and like here you going now.
Yeah.
Some people thrive under that. I don't think there's a good I don't think there's a good way to do that in Warhammer. I don't think
No.
I think that's the fastest way to get people to not like Age of Sigmar is to just be like, okay, buy 2,000 points, play it, and then just they get freaking tabled. You got to
Yeah.
have a real specific personality type that's
Mhm.
even more extreme than that cooperative player in the co-op game getting thrown into the deep end. You got to have yet
Yeah.
an even different mindset, and I think it goes on to like reinforce a different mindset in those players who end up in those situations. You go to a local game store. You spend time in a community like this, hanging out online, reading Goonhammer. You've read your getting started section on Goonhammer. You've watched some RantCast. You've seen Warhammer Weekly. You've done the whole thing, and now it's time to take your 2,000 point army that you've been lovingly painted. You've obsessed over the fluff. You've spent all your time on various forums talking about how cool the lore is for this thing, having questions about the rules, like getting them kind of wrong, like getting really overly invested in how correct you are about the rules in a game you haven't played yet. Now it's time to go to the LGS, and you go there, and you just get destroyed by pick a timetable or a time period. And what the army was at the time that was the most hated. That is the exact army that is there at the store. That's the one that destroyed you. You will forever hate that army now. Like, a lot of people are going to walk away from AOS. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. The story you're telling just there, that children is called dramatic irony. um, but no, I hear you. And it sort of rolls into it. I don't want to necessarily say meta because I'm not talking about the meta exactly.
right,
But the certain interplay between armies is not something that the book can teach you.
right,
The book can teach you how to play your army, and it might be able to tell you how your opponent's works, but it doesn't tell you how it's going to look on the table and what happens when you push those two armies against each other.
right.
Um, and sometimes it'll be fine, sometimes it won't. Sometimes it's lack of experience,
Yeah,
and sometimes it's just a bad matchup.
yeah,
But whatever reason it might be, it's if you want to get if you it's that's where it starts to come in about, what do you want out of this game?
Right.
If you want to become a circuit player who goes to GTs and plays a lot of games, that a lot of that involves just slamming your head against the desk over and over again until something clicks.
Yeah.
And that is an uncomfortable notion for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it makes you better or not if you are the type of person who can do that. Not by any means. It's just a certain type of person.
Right.
If someone is there for the more narrative aspect, or the camaraderie that comes with being in a group, you have to sort of set different expectations for them. And they, ends up being two ways I see that people deal with it. Either they don't like playing with strangers, which is unfortunate because it doesn't expand your circle, or they lose a lot and they're okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to give people like that extra credit too, because certainly I get demoralized when I lose a lot. So the type of people that can lose a lot and be like, "Hey, I had a good time," I give them credit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get salty. Like folks have seen salty Meph come out during like my Bloodborne. That happens too. But Blood Bowl streams, like where I'm like playing Blood Bowl online, and I'm just like I just get
Blood
like,
Bowl is just asking for trouble.
oh my gosh, it's different. Like so like XCOM is frustrating in and of itself. If the AI is another person and the AI is also and the RNG from XCOM is also against you, it is the only thing more frustrating than that is League of Legends. But like the XCOM dice meets a competitive other real life thinking breathing human. Oh, like salty math is rare form. Like no, I like if I lose certain game, like there are certain games. Usually, I get the saltiest when I beat myself, because it's like I can do like I don't care about dice. Dice are gonna dice you. It's like when I'm like I made a mistake and the dice are against me, it'll compound the stress. Or if I make a stupid decision because I'm like the pressure to. I was talking to one of my friends, Ty, does the Playin' and Slayin' podcast, and he was helping out at Brew City Brawl, Milwaukee tournament. I saw you did coverage of I think it was Circle City Clash, so like awesome by the way. I doubt the 3,000 point event Brew City Brawl will get coverage because it's a 3,000 point event. But I was talking to Ty about like now that like I am not Heywo or Warhammer Weekly, like I'm not on that level at all. But I have Asho at all. Most of my audience is from the Midwest, which are my stomping grounds for tournaments. I feel added pressure. Ty and I were talking about this. I feel added pressure to like perform at events now, like to where, like I have to be on. Like I don't just have to be a good sport in the communal sense of Age of Sigmar. I don't just have to be a like like general good member of the community. Now I have to be a good version of Mephisto, the person that you watch every couple weeks and for a couple hours while you paint your models. And I've got to show that like I can back up the knowledge I bring to my show in play. I can't have an off day of just forgetting a rule. I can't. And I know that's my pressure on me. And Ty and I were talking about that, and it's just like I don't even know how what led me down this path. But Ty and I were talking about that, and he's like, it's getting harder and harder to play in tournaments now because that pressure to be on like 2 levels now is different, and that has nothing to do with the topic at hand. So I apologize.
No, I think it was because I kind of steered into talking about what people want out of the game and what they're looking for and what that sort of means about how they handle loss. And because loss is an inevitable part of the game. It's something we don't like, but it's something we have to tolerate, and it's how you're going to work with that. But going back towards getting new people in, because clearly more people are getting in than ever. The game is more successful than it's ever been, thankfully. But I think the answer will always be having the best teacher. But like any teacher, teachers have teaching tools. And is there something we can do to give better teaching tools to people bringing new people in?
Magos asks, speaking of events, are either of you going to Adepticon? If so, what army are you looking at? I will be at Adepticon, but I will be a judge for the GT, helping out Brendan, the TO, with that event. So I won't be playing. I might play in the doubles. If I play in the doubles, I will probably play with Haywo. He's going to play Beastclaw Raiders. I will probably play Oops All Wolves. Fear Coast Dynasty. Just like I'm just gonna push Radiker the base and a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon forward with. I haven't run the math on 1,000 points yet, but I'm betting I can fit about that, and then it's just Wolf spam, because the Vlazda plus Radiker is gonna be enough. I need to fit in Belladama. I'm not gonna fit in Belladama. Like narrator, he could not fit in Belladama. You don't get a Vlazda and Belladama plus Radiker. But I always play like doubles super like me at peak wanting to have the most fun. It's just doubles are just like it's such a different meta and such a different play style. You just line up stupid crap and have fun, right? What about yourself?
I am also going to Adepticon. I have my rooms. Don't necessarily know the events. I know I will be in the GT. There's no question about that. Whether I'm involved in a doubles or a team tournament remains to be seen. I will probably keep on sticking to OBR. I've kind of tossed in my head about pulling Zinch out. I have the models. I need to work on them, but I've grown very attached to my OBR, and I'd like to try and see how far I can get them.
I like that. Yeah, you mentioned something. This is off stream in our like Illuminati AOS Illuminati chat. Um, you mentioned like kind of making the decision early on in 3.0 to kind of like commit to an army for like a year, and you just happen to choose Ossiarch Bonereapers, and um, I respect it. I respect it. Do you want to like elaborate on that, or what the thought process was, or have you set any like goalposts to meet with that, like temporally, or if there's hardware, like a record, like what's going on there?
Yeah. So uh, I in second edition I had pretty bad faction ADD. It was ping ponging around a lot. And I have a few people I know who are also in sort of that boat, and I actually realized how frustrating that ends up being for like to be on the other side of it. Ironically,
Interesting.
um, because a particular person that I know, as much as I enjoy playing with him, he almost never has an army ready to go because he's always in transition to a new army.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I realized kind of how frustrating that was, and I saw, following some streamers and things like that, the advice was that you have to play one army a lot and focus on that one army. Some players have two or three, but in general, you want to focus on a small pool. And if you want to get good, you got to focus on that. And that was sort of my goal. Um,
Yeah, the hashtag get
uh,
goodening as it's called around in
yeah,
the chat gang. Like
yeah, and
it's
and and getting better at the game has become my prerogative at this point. Because I can feel like I'm capable of more, but just the pieces don't always move into place when actually playing. But that comes from doing your reps and just getting used to the flow of the army.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
but
it also gives you a sort of control group for learning other people's armies. Like it's
mm,
which is a
for sure,
lesser sort of appreciated aspect of playing your one army. You get
yeah,
to unlock different layers of knowledge about the game when you have sort of a fixed point to start viewing everything from. If you're constantly in
and
flux, like
you're not so focused on trying to remember what your army does. You're able to look at what your opponent is doing and being
thousand
like,
percent,
ah, that's interesting.
yes, yes, yes.
Um, so I got OBR for the plan was to get it for Adepticon in 2019 before I got canceled. Um, and so my first event that I went to was ACO this past year. The last big tourney I was able to go to for second edition, and I brought my Ossiarch Bonereapers, and I ended up going 2-3. I feel like I could have done better.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of things that it just came from being really rusty from not being able to play regularly for the past year and a half.
Yeah, yeah.
But that was sort of a turning point where I was like, I feel like I want to do better than this.
Yes.
Um, so I've been I decided that I'm going to stick to one army, and regardless of what happens, I'm going to stick to that army. And I chose OBR before third. In some ways, I regret that for the reasons we've discussed. But I put in my time painting them and learning their sort of flow, and I've come to enjoy it quite a bit. So I'm going to keep on that. And if I can push myself to get that 4-1 at a GT, I'd be very happy.
That's really cool. That's really cool. I mean, for like I like that. I don't know how your view is on this, and you can certainly like sort of weigh in. I like thinking of performance not necessarily in terms of how you fall in the overall ranks. There's a lot of, I don't want to call it luck, but there's a lot of factors that go into whether your 4-1 score ends up best death versus someone else's 4-1 score. If you walk away with if you look at it in terms of 3-2, 4-1, 5-0, you can get some very useful, I guess, like sort of mental utility out of that for yourself. You can, there's a validation in going 3-2, 4-1, 5-0 that are all kind of irrespective of the specific rank. I know a lot of people. This isn't like a dig on like ranks or how tournaments sort themselves, but
For sure.
just giving yourself sort of like a pat on the back when you're like, okay, I want to go 4-1 as a more realistic goal than I want to win best death per se, right? Which is ironic because you could win a best death on a 3-2 with paint scores and sports scores. But if the goal is to win games, you got to set a goal that is more in line with that, which would be I want to go 4-1. That might be a little bit of a different goal than I want to win a best death, right? Because now you got to bring
Yeah.
the painting together. So, yeah, no, I think that's healthy. So, so are you sticking with them until you get that 4-1, or is it like I get to Adepticon and see how I'm doing?
We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I might switch before Adepticon. Adepticon is a pretty
That's a
liberal.
ways off, yeah.
Yeah, it's a ways off, and they have a pretty liberal deadline for turning in lists. So I got plenty of time to think about it, think about how I want to go about it.
Right, right. Okay, cool. And just while you're mentioning ACO, run by Martin Orlando, right? The Atlantic City Open.
Yes.
How was the event? Like,
Oh, it was wonderful. It was the
I know
first year
what
they
he
did it.
said about the event, but you wouldn't ask Caesar about Caesar. How did the event go? Yeah, from your perspective.
Yeah, no, it was great, especially for a first time event. I was amazed how smooth everything was. I had a great time, met some great people.
Yeah,
Um, and I'm definitely going to go back next year.
cool.
For someone who lives in the Northeast, it's the Northeast. It can be difficult to find good GTS. It's not as kind of they don't pop up as often as they do like in the Midwest. Um, and when I saw ACO, a GT of that size within a day's drive
Hmm.
was very nice to see, and it was worth going, and I'm definitely going to go next year.
Yeah, that one and Summer Slaughter are like kind of like I think the two premier events in that area right now. So,
Yeah,
Basement Wargaming does Summer Slaughter. I've heard some inside baseball from the outsider perspective, so to speak, on like the sort of Northeast America scene on how like just it's so much interplay. I don't want to call it drama, but like just the nature of like 40K and like the various like sort of I don't want to call it factions or whatever, but like it's just been very difficult to like get people on the same page to play games out there. And so I'm glad in this last year, in spite of all things, we got to see two sort of like very solid GT showings. I think Summer Slaughter was like what around 50 people too. Like that's pretty decent for quarantine event. Uh, Mentaro says I had no idea what was going on at ACO, but I was happy to be there. Oh yeah, excellent. Speaking of, yeah, so yeah, well, I hope if you do make it out to Adept, well, you've got the room you said. So when you make it out to
yeah,
Adepticon, I'll have to buy you a sugar-free Coke or beer if you're a beer person. Uh, yeah, we'll have to talk. So I think we got Goonhammer here. Um, only a couple topics. One that we kind of brought up and then we got off of. So AOS
yeah.
3.0. You think it's solid state? Good time to get into the game. You've done a lot of like sort of meta analysis on it. In terms of the health of the meta, do you think that our poor Ossiarch Bonereapers are feel like they're lagging behind a
Yeah.
little bit. But overall, the health of the meta, how do you feel about it?
Uh, I think actually it's in a better place than a lot of people give it credit for. I think the Godhammer problem, as it's been called, where sort of the Archaons and the Marathis of the world dominate a lot of it, that is a problem and it needs to be addressed.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the different armies that are winning, there's actually a fair number of paths to victory.
Right.
In terms of it's I think it's healthier than 40k is right now, where it's a very Drukhari admech meta. Um, I'd like to see the Godhammer problem addressed in whatever way it was. I'm not really smart enough to figure out exactly how I would say to address that. And also kind of find ways to bring up the armies who are not doing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly because it feels better to bring up somebody than it does to tear somebody down.
1,000%.
And a lot of the a lot of the armies that are doing best, I find, is the ones that are able to break the game in some way. There's movement shenanigans, in like Lumineth Realm Lords with the foxes. And I think that for that reason, the new Dragon Riders and Stormcast are going to be big because they can move and charge in the hero phase. A lot of the best armies are the ones that like get to skirt around the core rules of the game,
Mm-hmm.
and that's always been a thing. So it's not actually all that different from the way things were before, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion. I think that if we could just kind of balance things out a little bit more towards the lower end, it would be in a much happier place. But overall, it's not the worst that the game's been, and considering how we just transitioned from one edition to another, it's pretty impressive since there's only I mean, at this point, technically, there's not any new battle tomes on the market. They don't go up till Saturday.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, battle tomes are your opportunity to like easily remix the meta again. There's I love your perspective on bringing up the bottom. Like I really do. I think bringing up I mean that can be a freaking life lesson. Bringing up the thems that need it feels a lot better than it does like tearing down things. I love that perspective. The other aspect of it with Age of Sigmar is if you're tearing down the people at the top all the time, you're not necessarily addressing the problems that are keeping things in the dregs, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and furthermore, when you're tearing armies down, uh, maybe there's an army in the bottom that can equalize them. Could be a thing. The other aspect is like you're now messing with my money and my toys, and don't mess with my money and my toys.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
bought this army on the promise of I was going to be able to do this thing that you said I was going to be able to do with the battle tome that I purchased and the like faction focus you released and the Warcom articles, and now I don't get to do that. Like
ask every Knights of Slaanesh player over the past year and a half
the
or so.
roller coaster they've been on. I mean, even if
Yeah,
even if you take power out of the equation, right? Like how well the army was performing, that
yeah,
army went through the most drastic changes in a 1 year span than perhaps any other army before or
and and
since.
and, and I find like
Iron
kind of
Jaws would
going
be
off
the
your
only
point.
other one that had that much change. Go on.
Yeah, and going off your point, I find that people they're upset about the power drop for sure, but
Yeah,
they're
of
more
course.
upset about the fact that the thing that the army did that they liked no
Mhm.
longer gets to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
And if that thing's broken, sure, you do need to change it. But people want to be able to feel like that the general feel and gist of the army is remaining the same, even if the exact toolkit isn't exactly the same. And that's been the bad feel for Slaanesh. It's
Yeah.
they feel like their army's been completely changed on them, and now they've been sold something that they didn't intend to buy.
Well, you just like sort of hammered like sort of hammered home an opinion on Ossiarch Bonereapers at the beginning. Like a lot of us are on board with relentless discipline as a mechanic. We don't want it to go away completely, or at least I don't. I don't want to speak for you. I don't want to go. I'm on board with relentless discipline. It's just like the thing I was on board with doesn't feel the same as it used to. I don't need to have a completely different set of rules, but I want my snowflake powers back. I want to feel the generalship, right?
Yeah,
Um, so that brings us to like the only I don't know like the proud nail of this I think this discussion. Artifacts. This is the one thing I said we'd circle back to. You mentioned
Yeah,
that the not the doppelganger's cloak. You mentioned a Zinch artifact early on. If you want to just kind of reset that real quick, and we'll kind of
yeah. This was before a lot of people logged on. I said that one of the things that drew me into Age of Sigmar was the paradoxical cloak. Um, was the paradoxical cloak because its thing, and they've managed to preserve that, was that the +2 to saves, but you have to reroll your saves. I love goofy shit like that.
hmm
And that was one of the things that drew me into Age of Sigmar because it told me a little bit about the tone of this game, what it was like. Um, and I think the direction you're kind of going with that is that maybe we've kind of lost some of that over time, and is that a bad thing?
Yeah, I don't want to do any prescriptive judgments here. Ask the
Yeah,
philosophical
certainly.
question, and you see, this used to be that paradoxical cloak kind of used to be a little bit more the norm for artifacts. Right now, we're seeing a lot of very straightforward, for lack of a better term, kind of boring artifacts.
Yeah,
Um, I don't know if this is a thing good, thing bad situation,
yeah,
but I do miss wacky artifacts. Um,
yeah. I think so. I think what happened was as the game has shifted away, because Age of Sigmar, its inherent design seemed to be antithetical to competitive play. GW seemed to be going for that for whatever reason, and I'm not sure if that was the most productive way of looking at it. But they seem to be going for a much more casual, pick up a few models, throw them down, and have a good time type game, which is why there weren't any points. The rules were 4 pages long or whatever. And then over time, they realized they kind of needed more codified rules. So
mhm.
they did introduce artifacts, but they were much more, they didn't introduce that kind of stuff, but it was much more fun and laid back. Another Zinch one that comes to mind is how the Changeling used to work versus how he works now. Um, his original thing, are you familiar?
Sorry, which one? Changeling?
Yes.
You'd have to reset it for those that maybe don't
Yeah,
know how it works. Anyway.
yeah. So basically, how the changeling used to work is he could steal the weapon off of somebody, like copy the stats of another weapon.
hmm
Um, they've since really streamlined his how he works. Or specifically, he could be put behind your enemy's field of vision in in their deployment zone, and they couldn't pick him out unless a hero got close to him. So it was like he was disguising himself as one of the guys and uh, hiding in the mist of everything. And then once he got into combat, he could steal and he could copy a hero's weapon and fight them with it.
Yeah.
Um, it wasn't necessarily he wasn't necessarily the best character, but it was a fun idea,
Yeah.
and they've kind of taken that and really kind of stripped a lot of the weirdness out of it to make it much more straightforward, which I think all of that stuff is an intent to make a more competitive friendly game.
Interesting.
Um, if you want a competitive friendly game, you can't have too many abilities that are too difficult to wedge into the game as it currently exists.
Interesting.
If people are arguing over rules all the time, it's going to become a problem. So I think that's why we've seen a push more towards much more straightforward things. Those are easier to slot into a game as it stands without disrupting things too much,
Right.
and it's easier to conceptualize the purpose of it very early on
hmm
without needing to overthink it too much.
Right.
Um, and it's not a good thing, bad thing. I think that this is the direction the game's moving, and
Mm,
this is the direction the game is moving, and that is the changes that needs to be made. Now, what I think could happen is, and I think it's been a missed opportunity so far, is that you could have weird artifacts like that in Path to Glory, um, because that's more of a system that's more open to the RPG loosey goosey fun stuff.
mhm.
And I think that's been an untapped resource to be able to take advantage of that. I was actually very disappointed that Path to Glory so far, even in the 2 new battle tomes, the only upgrades you can get for your heroes are command traits and artifacts that are already in your book.
Mm,
I was like, you have room to have fun with new ideas, and
right.
it's kind of not really been scratched yet. Is my has that how I felt.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. No, I don't particularly disagree with anything. I was just curious to hear your thoughts. Cool. Um, so the real reason we're all here, now that like we've got only the hardcore RantCast listeners, is to, like we could talk about meta. We could this is where we could give everyone sick list tech. You can see a lot of that on Goonhammer. There's a lot of really good discussion about like just sort of getting into an army, things like that. The real meta we are concerned about is the coffee meta, though. Um, so we had a conversation about coffee. Where do you come down? What's the S tier coffee right now? As far as like if you're like if you were to like get into the coffee meta, what coffee should you go with?
I'm exposing so much about me, especially where I live. But a Dunkin' Donuts pumpkin spice latte is what I have to buy every morning, or I can't do anything else.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Once
Um,
once late August hits, I'm buying one of those every day.
See, for a while there, it's like the sriracha thing was happening with pumpkin spice for a little bit there, and like it there's this thing that happens. Maybe it's the little bit of the contrarian streak that I have, where like if people start to get too loud disliking something, then I will. It's like the sort of bullies bully. Like if people start to bully the thing, then I will like stand between it, like just whatever it is. Like if people start coming down on pumpkin spice lattes too much, it's like suddenly I'm like, oh, they're the best thing ever. I'm just to mess with people. Like the same thing happened with A Christmas Story. I had no opinion on that movie whatsoever. Just people hated it. And when I was a manager at Barnes and Noble, we had the Nooks, the little tablets. I would put Christmas Story on every day on loop, just so
Hell
that
yeah,
people would
that's how
come
you
in and
get
be
them.
like, "I hate this movie." And I'm like, "I love it." I didn't care about it until you hated it, and then your hate made it better for me.
Well, we talked about like the performative hate with Twilight and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Too so much.
yeah. Like people get so invested in something that I don't think it's worth the investment. So then I take the contrarian position just to prey on their overinvestment. Is really
That
what
is
it is.
a that is a pro troll move, my friend. I approve.
Pro true. No, no, like so coffee is for me. It's I love coffee. Yes, welcome to the coffee portion of the stream, everyone. I'm glad you made it this far. So Tristan,
Yeah,
who
why
was
are
in,
you still here? Go to bed.
yeah, go with this 3 hours almost of talking about Warhammer and now coffee. What the heck's going on, everyone? Um, so for me, like we touched on earlier some sort of like alienation, some sort of general malaise with this sort of current generation. See, I need coffee that tastes as horrible as I feel, um,
Mm.
but not bad. Okay, these are two
Yeah,
different things. Okay, Starbucks coffee is bad, as in it doesn't taste good at all. It's the acid levels off with it. I always have heartburn drinking Starbucks coffee. But but when I drink coffee, that's not the when I drink coffee, it needs to resonate with my soul. So I love gas station coffee. My S tier is it's a local chain. It's Quick Trip. Um,
hmm
we do have a Dunks nearby. It's a little bit out of range for where I start my day. So I go to the Quick
yeah.
Trip. And yeah, I have a coffee pot. Sometimes I set it to autopilot so the robot makes me coffee and I can wake up and I can get coffee. But there's something about walking into a KT with like my little thermos where like refills are stupid cheap. And I go in and like I look at their display of coffees. Right now they have a pumpkin spice coffee and a hazelnut coffee. I usually go with the Colombian because it's fair trade and rainforest certified, nice. So I usually go with that. Sometimes I'll splash in some pumpkin spice just because when I'm drinking it, I can feel the haters hating, and it sustains me. And then there's like a plethora of creamers and little like pumps that I can put. There's just something about like when I'm feeling some kind of way, I go in and I like it's coffee time, and then I drink it and like it. There's something about when you get the creamer and the flavor and the blend of coffee just right, where it's just there's nothing quite like it. Yeah, I know there's like baristas out there that make excellent coffee, and like that coffee's good too, but I
hmm
don't deserve it. I'm a working slob.
No, and I think that's the source of me too. Is I check so many boxes in terms of being a working class Boston resident that just I don't want the Starbucks coffee. I want the shittiest coffee you can get me.
I this is unironic. I actually think Dunkin' Donuts coffee is better than Starbucks. Like, legitimately, it tastes better. Like, but hey, I just defended gas station coffee as S tier. What it is it's the generalship of
Yeah.
going in and I'm spending my RDP to to get like one pump of like the ginseng or whatever like pump that they keep there because today I need the extra energy boost.
Yeah, no, and it's it's sometimes it's it's like crappy beer or fast food or something like that. Like you consciously know that those are bad things, and that you could get better quality if you wanted to, but sometimes you really just want to hit that particular niche for whatever reason that your animal brain is all over it.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, your housemate's the opposite, says D6. So good coffee is great, but there's something special about burnt, never cleaned coffee pot, black coffee sludge. Oh, diner coffee. There's
Yeah,
actually like diners have gotten like they've hit the sweet spot in between. Like they know it's diner coffee, but they're also making good coffee. You know,
yeah,
like that's the. I mean, it's. I guess there's that part of me that watched, like Twin Peaks when I was really young with my grandma, and just like the coffee diner scene, the resonant spookiness of the thing that just I've always just been a bit of a spooky kid, right? And
yeah.
just like something about that coffee, add in my grandpa who was a sailor and he drank coffee constantly. I got coffee way too young, like it's
Yeah.
always been a thing. But diner coffee, like but you gotta sit down for the diner coffee. At that point, it's almost the experience. But I want that coffee pot where, like, when they're pouring it, I can see the ring. That's just like in the glass, like it's like tattooed into it. Who doesn't like Dunkin'? Who loves Starbucks? Oh my! Oh, your roommate doesn't like Dunkin'. He loves Starbucks. Disgusting. Uh,
Banish him.
yeah, banished. Kick him out. uh, Having grown up in an area where there was Dunkin' Donuts every square mile in the state, America runs on Dunkin'. Well, we consume. So little chat gang trivia. We actually consume more coffee than anyone in the world. Uh,
Yes, that I know.
like, and it's
Um,
not even close.
Rolling back to my Peace Corps experience, it might sound like a little bit of a downer, but I'm going to bring it up anyway.
No, it's cool. It's
It's
cool.
one of
Now
the
it's
interesting things was so I'm in the Peace Corps. I was in Indonesia, and I was on the island of Java, which so you can guess what they make a lot of.
yeah,
Um, but you couldn't actually get good coffee there, shockingly, because it was all exported.
yeah.
It was all really crappy Insta stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't much care for it. But yeah, it's all gets exported, and that's been so like that was sort of a eye-opening moment about how America doesn't really make its coffee; it just kind of gets it
Well,
from other places.
yeah. Well, how capital goes into areas, extricates their resources, and leaves them with literally not even their own resource, like and takes it
Yeah,
elsewhere and sells it at a premium. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
crazy.
for sure.
Yeah. I want to. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's downer. That's it's not full doomer take. I mean, this is the world, right? And we need to be aware of this crap. Like, you just gotta.
It's a state of, yeah, it's a state of the way things are.
I want to stare into my coffee. Uh, I'm staring into my coffee, and it be the same as staring into the abyss, and I want it to stare back.
Stare back.
Yeah,
I don't know if staining into the abyss was a typo, but it's pretty good.
it's actually pretty. Like, I want to stare at my staining coffee and have it stare back. I'm usually really good at like editing, like people's words when they're typing. Uh,
Oh, dude, I thought you had something there. This is a very profound statement.
yeah,
Don't stain the abyss, for the abyss will stain back.
we consume the most, yeah, volumetric, but Finland wins per capita. Legit.
I can believe that.
Yeah,
I can believe that.
legit. And the quality of coffee we're consuming is usually lower too, right? Like we drink a lot more like the Starbucks. It's like a coffee like you would get it in France is a lot closer to an espresso than it is, the
Yeah.
dirt water we drink. But we deserve the dirt water. We're working class. Like I want the whole thermos, and to like as I'm drinking it, my black soul.
I will. Yeah. I'd like to consume large amounts of the terrible stuff rather than the tiny cup of
Yeah.
the good stuff.
No, it's both. All things in moderation. All right. So, any final thoughts on Goonhammer? I said I was going to work in a Star Wars joke, and I started on one, but the timing wasn't right. So,
Yeah, no, it's fine.
do you wanna
We'll mix it now.
mention Fifth Trooper just real quick? Because you don't
Yeah,
just write Warhammer. You're like, as established, an Omni nerd like myself. You want to mention
yeah,
Fifth Trooper real quick?
yeah. In addition to Goonhammer.com, which again you should all go to, Goonhammer.com. Um, I also write for the Fifth Trooper, which is a Star Wars Legion website. That is probably my next favorite war game. It's a very fun skirmish war game, even if you don't like Star Wars. Um, yeah, check out me on either of those sites.
Right on. Right on. Right on. Yeah, and so any last things on like the topic at hand? Anything you want to finish off talking about? Goonhammer, Warhammer, Age of Sigmar, artifacts, coffee matter, super
No,
important.
we talked about so much stuff tonight. I had a great time. Thank you for having me on.
Right on. And if people want to like sort of catch you online, where's a good place to look for you?
Like I said, you can get me on Goonhammer. Just shoot an email to our contact email if you want to get me. I'll also put my Discord handle in the chat if anybody wants to add me. I love talking to people about war games and anything else.
Right on, right on. And so now we've entered the stage called the final soapbox, the digital soapbox. Do you have any cathartic airing of grievances or rants you need to get off your chest about wargaming or otherwise?
Um,
Gotcha
about anything,
journalism.
huh?
Boom. Yeah, you weren't ready for that. No, like what do we do? It's just a gag. Sometimes I talk about video games. You know, a movie came
Oh,
out that I
I
didn't
just
like. Yeah.
if you want me to air grievances off my chest, I'll just say crush capitalism and leave it there.
There you go. Hell yeah. Hell yeah, comrade. Like the flag slowly raises up behind.
Soviet Union anthem. I should have keyed
Fantastic.
it up. That was my fault.
Yeah, no, it's good. Like you just hear it. Oh my gosh. Fantastic. Hello there. Uh, well, thank you so much for being on tonight. This has been an absolute blast.
I
I
had
love
so much fun. Thank you.
you should come back on first and foremost. And second, you need to do the podcast circuit. We're gonna talk to the Illuminati, and you should be on a Warhammer Weekly here like soon.
Yeah, yeah, sure, absolutely.
Very thoughtful, thoughtful takes. Really good writing. Like again, you don't need me to like puff your ego any, but I've really enjoyed getting to know you and chatting with
No,
you tonight.
please don't stop. I love it.
But writers love validation too, so I'm saying I'm not gonna.
No, no. In all seriousness, it's not a vanity thing. I love hearing that. For a long time there was a lot of concern to me, and I'm sure you kind of felt this too when you were starting out streaming. That you're just kind of doing stuff into the void,
Yeah,
and
shouting
if,
into the
is,
void.
is
Yeah,
is any is anybody actually watching this? And
yeah,
it actually, like, knowing that what you're writing is being read and what you're doing is being seen, means a lot. So it's great to talk to you, and hear nice things.
yeah. Right on, right on, right on. All right, well, chat gang, you know this part. You're the show within the show. The reason I do this thing. Drink your milk, pay your taxes, and be excellent to each other. We'll catch you next week with Tomb King Tristan and Party at the All Points. Good night, everybody.
Bye.